committee meeting and consider adding that item to the agenda. during that
Absolutely.
time. Thank you. That's all I want to know.
Okay. All right. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? That passes 6-0. So it takes us to our work session, but before we do the work session, just to take something out of order, Josh Cortez is here this evening to give us what will be he's got 5 days left in his illustrious senior career, and will give us the last board report. So Josh, thanks for coming this evening, and the floor is yours.
First of all, thank you guys for fitting me in. And then without further ado, I'll begin. So for leadership class, we just finished up our lip dub, which I'm glad to say went well. The final project will be released in the coming weeks. And then also, leadership class is organizing that mentorship committee for incoming freshmen next year. We filmed the videos and they're ready to go, and those will be displayed in the 8th graders' homerooms. For NHS, Senior Survivor Week is happening now. Then each team is raising money throughout the week for the Iowa Right Now Foundation and the Pulmonary Hypertension Association. This is a big undertaking, as these teams will be spending the week living in the school and dedicating all their time to this cause. So please support where you can. Executive board, our student council banquet was a success. It was a great night for students, administrators, and parents to see the accomplishments of each council. And then for student council, senior class council is working hard on graduation right now, which will take place on June 9th at 8 p.m. at the BHS Fieldhouse. Junior class council is working diligently on prom, which will take place on June 3rd at Suburban Collection Showplace in Novi. And then sophomore and freshman councils are just helping in where additional help is needed. And for some important senior dates, May 22nd through 26th, like I said, Senior Survivor Week is happening now. Last day of school for seniors and the senior walk is June 2nd. And then June 3rd is prom. June 7th is a summa cum laude breakfast. June 9th is graduation. And then June 10th is a senior all-night party. And then I just have some final remarks, as this is my last meeting. So first, I'd like to thank the individuals who make Brighton the special place that it is. Thank you, teachers, for tirelessly working and supporting every student through their trials and tribulations. Thank you, administrators, for working behind the scenes on vital projects to keep the school system running smoothly. Thank you, school board members, for dealing with the demanding situation so that we don't have to. Finally, last but not least, thanks Mom and Dad for blessing me with a childhood that I always cherish. Brighton is a community that has provided me with a better childhood than I could ever have imagined. I vividly remember being out on recess at Hawkins and lunchtime intramurals at Maltby, family fun nights at Scranton, and school dances at the high school. Though these memories may seem insignificant to some, these are memories that will hold a special place in my heart indefinitely. I feel truly blessed to call this place home. Although I will depart on new experiences and adventures in a few short months, I hope to return here one day and provide my hopeful children with the experience that shaped me into the person that I am today. With that being said, it is my hope that all of us here today continue to persist through the divisive nature of our world today in order to keep Brighton the place that it has always been, a place for families. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Josh. Best of luck always, buddy.
Thank you very much, and good luck.
Good luck, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. We appreciate all of the insight that you've been able to give us this year, and we are very excited about your future and wish you all of the best. And I would just say, Star, I think your last remarks are in the handout that you provided, and I think it would be good to include those remarks in the minutes of the meeting verbatim, so that it's reflected. I thought that was really eloquent and heartfelt, and thank you for doing that, Josh. That was great. Yeah. All right. So that moves us now to the actual workshop portion of the agenda on this evening. The topic is closed session guidelines, and we have asked Mr. Brad Banaszak from he's legal counsel for the Michigan Association of School Boards to be with us here this evening. He is participating remotely. Mr. Banaszak will give us an overview of the topic of closed sessions. He's provided or is going to be reviewing, as I understand it, slide presentation. I believe everyone should have a copy of the printout of the slides that he will be reviewing. As far as the format of questions and answers, I mean, I don't have a preference if when we're on a particular topic, if somebody wants to ask a particular question, if Mr. Banasak is fine with that, or if we want to have him go through the whole presentation and then have a question and answer session after that. It doesn't matter to me, and I guess I would defer to Mr. Banasak, whatever he would prefer with regarding that format. So without further ado, Mr. Banasak, welcome to our meeting. We appreciate you taking the time this evening to be able to make this presentation for us on this very important topic.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate the presentation. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I see some head shaking. Yes. All right. Well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen now. I will include my PowerPoint presentation. So as I'm going through the presentation, I guess we can save questions till the end. That would probably be the easiest way for me to address your questions. Presentation will probably be about 15, 20 minutes or so, and then we'll, have as much time as necessary for the questions. So let's go ahead and share that. Let me pull up my PowerPoint one more time here. Give me 1 second. I'm having difficulty pulling it up. Just give me one more minute here. Not sure why I'm not unable to pull it up here. Give me 1 second.
There it is.
All right. Can everybody see that? All right. Thank you for your patience. Appreciate that. All right. Let's go ahead and get started.
Just so you know, that's not the PowerPoint up on the screen.
We see your file list,
But you don't see the PowerPoint?
No.
right?
Okay. Let me try it one more time. Usually I'm using Zoom, so I'm not too familiar with the Google Meets program. So not sure why it's not pulling up my PowerPoint, why it just has my file screen here. All right, I think I got it now. Can everybody see that?
There we go. Yep.
All right. Again, thank you for your patience. I appreciate that. All right. So, closed meetings. I like to start off all my Open Meetings Act presentations with this slide. Gives you an indication of how the courts interpret the Open Meetings Act. OMA will always be interpreted in favor of openness. So in terms of interpreting and reading the closed meeting exceptions under the Open Meetings Act, that's how courts are going to interpret them. Always in the favor of transparency, always in the favor of openness. So if there's any question or challenge regard to a closed meeting exception, the burden of proof, burden of proving the applicability of the closed meeting exception is always going to lie with the public body. So if there's any ever any question about a public body meeting in closed session, any legal challenge relating to that, the burden of proof is on the public body to show that it was legitimately in the closed meeting. So just kind of keep that in mind as we're going through the presentation here. So these are my top 5 closed meeting violations. We'll expand on these as we go through the closed meeting exceptions. I guess one I wanted to focus on right now, and we'll get to the other 4 as we work through the closed meeting exceptions, is citing personnel matters as the reason for calling a closed meeting. Now, as you'll find out, there are a number of personnel reasons for going into closed session. However, when you go into closed session, you have to be specific with the closed meeting reason in your motion and in your minutes. So just citing personnel reasons or personnel matters as a reason for calling a closed meeting is not sufficient. It doesn't have the necessary specificity required by the Open Meetings Act. So while you can go in to closed sessions for personnel matters, you have to cite the actual personnel matter that's going to be covered in closed session. And we'll get into those personnel matters in a little bit as we go through the closed meeting exceptions. So just a few broad requirements relating to closed session. Obviously, you have to be in open session first in order to be in closed session. A school board cannot just call a closed session without a closed meeting, without an open meeting associated with it. Is you have to make a decision to go into closed session. Now, a closed session doesn't necessarily have to be on a meeting agenda. It doesn't have to be on your meeting notice. You just have to be in an open meeting in order to act to go into closed session. Okay. And some of these decisions are the decisions that are required to go into closed session. Some require a majority vote, and some require a 2/3 roll call vote for going into closed session. And my presentation will highlight those that require the 2/3 roll call vote. Now, some boards, in the interest of not keeping track of which ones require a 2/3 roll call vote and which ones require a simple majority vote, a lot of boards will just always do a roll call vote for going into closed session. So not required by law to do a roll call vote for all your closed sessions, but it's kind of a best practice for a lot of boards because some of the closed sessions do require a 2/3 roll call vote. So this one relates to the number 1 closed meeting violation that I referred to earlier, making a decision in closed session. So you're only permitted to deliberate in closed session. You make the action to go in, you take the vote to go into closed session in an open meeting. And then once you're in closed session, you're limited to just deliberations. Now, there's one very, very narrow exception to that. We'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation here. But 99.9% of the time, while you're in closed session, you can only deliberate. So you always deliberate, stop short of making a decision. All decisions that relate to topics discussed in closed session, those must occur in open session. So who can
Pretty
attend a
enlightening.
closed session? Well, that's up to the board. Obviously, members of the board will attend that closed session, but other individuals may attend. Some cases by past practice. Traditionally, always the superintendent will attend a closed session. Sometimes the superintendent's assistant will attend that closed session as well. Now, other individuals may be admitted to a closed session, but if there's any question about whether that person should be included in the closed session or not, that could be a board decision. And a lot of times this decision can be made by consent. So the president, for example, would say, any objection to Principal Smith attending the closed meeting tonight? Hearing no objection, Principal Smith shall be admitted to the closed session. That's making the decision by consent. Now, if you have one board member object to that question about whether Principal Smith should attend a closed session, then you would actually have a motion, second, and vote determine whether that that individual should attend the closed session or not. So let's get into some of the purposes for going into closed session. Section A. This is one of the ones that covers a personnel reason for going into closed session. Permits a public body to go into closed session to consider dismissal, suspension, or disciplining of a school district employee or board member if that named person requests a closed session. So this is an example where the board doesn't hold the decision to go into closed session. It's the staff member or board member who's subject to discipline in the case of a board member, or dismissal, suspension in the case of a staff member, or discipline for that staff member. So it's the individual that must request that closed session. If there isn't a closed meeting request under Section 8A, the board cannot go into closed session. This exception also permits a board to go into closed session to hear complaints or charges against an employee or board member. And again, the employee or board member who is the subject of the complaint or charge, that individual must request a closed session in order for the board to meet in closed session. Section 8A requires a majority vote. So 7-member board, you need at least 4 board members to go into closed session for this reason. Now, Section A also covers personnel evaluations. And for the board, this will involve evaluating your superintendent. But again, it's the employee who's being evaluated that must request the closed session. And what's interesting about Section 8A, which is highlighted in this example, as far as going into closed session for evaluation purposes, is that the person requesting the closed hearing may rescind that request at any time. And in that case, the matter at issue shall be considered after the rescission only in open session. So at times, I will get the question, well, can a board meet in closed session while evaluating the superintendent and exclude the superintendent from that closed session? Well, the answer is yes, legally you could under the Open Meetings Act, but from a governance perspective, MASB obviously doesn't recommend that. We feel that it would hurt the relationship between the board and the superintendent if the superintendent were to be excluded from the closed session relating to the superintendent's evaluation. And then also, if the superintendent was to be excluded from that closed session, he or she could also rescind that request for the closed session at any time, and then the evaluation would have to be discussed in open session. So again, this one requires a majority vote, but can only go into closed session at the request of the staff member being evaluated. So here's some rules, Open Meetings Act rules for the superintendent's evaluation under Section 8A. You see the open phase of it. Determining the process of the evaluation and the type of evaluation instrument, part of the open phase. I interpret those provisions to also cover establishing objectives for the evaluation. So any objectives, any goals that are tied to the superintendent's evaluation, those have to be established in open session. Now, the progress relating to those goals can be discussed in closed session at the request of the superintendent. But while those goals are being established and developed, that has to be done in open session. Now, this was another one, another reason for a possible closed meeting violation listed in my list of 5. The closed session creep, okay, where you legitimately start in closed session but then your conversation creeps to the point of exceeding the scope of the closed session. And under this exception, it's very easy to do. So you're in closed session, deliberating on the superintendent's evaluation. Superintendent evaluates it highly effective, and then the board starts getting into discussions. Well, let's talk about extending the contract, or due to the highly effective evaluation, let's talk about a salary increase. All that has to be discussed in open session. You can't discuss any of those contractual matters in closed session under section 8A. Section 8B of the Open Meetings Act allows you to go into closed session to consider discipline relating to a student, expulsion or suspension. Usually, if it's before the board, it's going to be an expulsion or a long-term suspension. But again, this exception only applies if the student, if 18, requests the closed session, or if the student is under 18, the parent or guardian requests that closed session. Again, only deliberations in closed session. Any decision relating to suspending or expelling the student has to be done in open session, and board needs to be aware. Need to keep the student's identity confidential while you're in open session, making a decision possibly on expulsion or suspending the student. You have to ensure that no information is released that would make the student's identity easily traceable. So you want to keep the student's identity confidential to ensure that you're complying with FERPA. Again, this one requires a majority vote at the request of the parent or student if the student is 18. Section 8C. This is the one that some folks interpret allowing a board to discuss the superintendent's contract in closed session. Well, note that this only covers strategy and negotiation related to a collective bargaining agreement. It does not cover individual contracts. So going back to that first slide that we looked at, courts interpret these closed meeting exceptions very literally and narrowly. Court would not interpret this provision broadly to say, well, if it covers collective bargaining agreements, it's got to cover individual contracts, right? No. Courts will read it literally and narrowly, only covers collective bargaining agreements, does not cover individual contracts. So, and this exception is one of the reasons why you cannot discuss your superintendent's contract in closed session, because it doesn't cover individual contracts. Now, in terms of the collective bargaining agreements, this exception only applies when you're actively engaged in bargaining or preparing for bargaining. So maybe you have a contract that expires June 30th. You're strategizing in January or February relating to that contract in closed session. That would be permissible. Or discussing a letter of interpretation or letter of agreement relating to a CBA. That could be discussed in closed session as well, because that is considered to be part of the collective bargaining agreement. And this one requires a majority vote as well. So this was the limited exception I referred to earlier that allows you to make a decision in closed session. So the facts of this case involve a board that was in closed session discussing collective bargaining strategy with its chief negotiator. Board president solicited board members' opinions on a pending proposal, asking each board member to indicate where he or she stood on going forward with this proposal with the union. So it was essentially an informal vote in closed session on this pending proposal. The board was challenged on this process, claiming that it made a decision in closed session in violation of OMA. This case went up to our Michigan Court of Appeals. Court of Appeals found that the board did not violate the Open Meetings Act. It interpreted the word deliberation to permit a board to establish a consensus and develop a course of action relating to negotiating that contract for the purpose of bargaining strategy. So there still had to be a decision in open session relating to the bargaining strategy that was developed in closed session. So the court emphasized that that was not a final determination affecting public policy, where the board members expressed their opinion about where they stood on that particular proposal. So that was not a decision as interpreted under the Open Meetings Act. Section 8D allows a closed session to consider the purchase or lease of real property. Note that this doesn't cover selling property, only covers purchasing property. Allows you to meet in closed session to direct, this case likely to be your superintendent or maybe your business manager, as to the limits in negotiating the purchase of real property. Requires a 2/3 roll call vote. So with this exception and the other exceptions that we'll talk about in a bit, you have to have at least 5 board members at the meeting. 2/3 vote, 7. It's not 2/3 of the board members present. It's 2/3 of the membership of the board. So in order to meet in closed session, under this reason, need at least 5 board members present and a 5-0 vote. So if you had 5 members present and as a 4-1 vote, it would not be sufficient. Or if you just had a bare minimum quorum at your meeting and it was a 4-0 vote to go into closed session, that wouldn't be sufficient either. Pending litigation. Now, this is not the attorney-client privilege exception. This is a completely different closed meeting exception from that. This allows you to go into closed session to consider pending litigation if all of these elements are met. Your attorney must be present. Now, your attorney could be physically present or virtually present. You must identify the specific pending litigation. So it can't be threatened litigation. It actually has to be pending. So that means you receive proof of service, you're actually being sued, or a grievance has been filed, something has been filed against your school district where there is going to be a judicial process to address that claim. And then number 3 kind of goes without saying, meeting in open session would have a negative financial effect on your litigation settlement or settlement position. That's very easy to prove. And then again, this one requires a 2/3 roll call vote as well. So this case here requires identifying the case. Prior to 2018, you didn't have to identify the court case that was at issue, that permitted you to go into closed session. However, the Court of Appeals has interpreted the Open Meetings Act to require that you specifically identify that specific pending litigation as the Court of Appeals has interpreted the Open Meetings Act. Section 8F allows you to go into closed session to review the contents of employment applications and applications submitted by individuals seeking appointment to public office. This one requires a 2/3 roll call vote. Most cases, would apply when a school district is going through a superintendent search, where the candidates have requested confidentiality. Okay, in this case, the candidates must request confidentiality. Could possibly apply to a school board member search, but most cases, when you have a vacancy on your school board, those applicants for the school board haven't requested confidentiality. Section 8H permits a closed meeting to consider material exempt from discussion or disclosure by state or federal statute. This is your closed meeting exception, or this is your attorney-client privilege exception. There isn't a separate provision or section in the Open Meetings Act that indicates you can meet in closed session for the purposes of attorney-client privilege. But under this one, because a written opinion from your attorney is confidential under the Freedom of Information Act, allows you to go into closed session for the purposes of considering that written opinion. So under this exception, that's why your legal opinion has to be in writing. If it wasn't in writing, it wouldn't be subject to the Freedom of Information Act and wouldn't be exempt from FOIA. So it has to be a written attorney-client privilege document. Education records also would be protected under this exception. So as a quick point on the attorney-client privilege, again, it has to be written communications that render advice or offer an opinion basis of confidential facts gathered from the client or the client's agent by the client's attorney. It does not protect documents just because they're the product of an attorney-client relationship. And also you can't make a document confidential under FOIA by bringing it into a closed session. That document has to be created essentially in closed session in order for it to be exempt from FOIA as well. So the last closed meeting exception is Section 8K. This is the most recent one that was added to the Open Meetings Act, was added in 2019. Very straight and to the point, allows you to go into closed session to consider security planning to address existing threats or prevent potential threats to the safety of the students and staff. So those are the closed meeting exceptions. There's a few other points here, and then I'll open it up for questions. Closed meeting minutes. You're required to have minutes of your closed meeting. So you have two separate sets of minutes: open minutes, and then your open meeting minutes, and then your closed meeting minutes. Open session minutes, public document, subject to FOIA, subject to disclosure. Your closed session minutes, very confidential, cannot be disclosed or released to the public without a court order. These minutes must be retained by your designated clerk of the school board, kept in a special locked file apart from the minutes of an open meeting at the district office. So there must be a chain of custody here. Your superintendent's executive assistant, they're responsible for keeping the confidentiality of the minutes. And that, what that means is that board members should not have copies of those minutes in their personal possession. You would review them at the meeting. And then while approving those, after approving the closed session minutes, you would submit any copies back to your administration. Based on this, confidentiality, many boards have established the practice. If you're taking notes in a closed session, those notes should be collected by the administration and kept with the school district along with the official copy of the closed session minutes. The last point I wanted to cover is what happens when a board member publicly divulges confidential information which was conveyed in closed session. Well, this has been interpreted by courts and our Attorney General that any information that is shared from a closed session is akin to sharing the minutes of that closed session. So sharing minutes with a third person, the third party, who wasn't a part of that closed session, is considered to be a violation of the Open Meetings Act. And courts have interpreted closed meeting minutes to mean pretty much everything discussed in that closed session, just not the physical hard copy of the closed session minutes. Yeah, obviously it would be a violation to forward a copy of closed session minutes to a third party, but The courts have also found that sharing information from a closed session may go beyond that hard copy of the minutes is sharing closed session minutes as well in violation of the Open Meetings Act. So there's an obligation of confidentiality to ensure that whatever is discussed in closed session isn't shared with a third person or a third party. And on that note, we'll go ahead and stop sharing and try to bring the camera back. All right.
Any questions, Andy? You want to
Yeah,
start?
I've got questions, but I always ask questions, so I'd like to give others a chance to ask if they have them. And if not, I'll ask mine.
Ms. Reed?
I had a couple of questions. The first one was about attendance at the closed session. You said it's by the consent of the board, and then if anyone objects, we need to have a vote on it. Does that mean we need to explicitly describe who's going to join us in closed session while we're still in open session?
Yeah, generally that would be the case. Now, if it's a parent or student, if identifying that individual would make a student identity easily traceable, then you wouldn't discuss that individual's identity in closed session.
Sure.
So there could be a confidentiality issue, but probably more so in terms of student discipline. There may be confidentiality issues with other closed meeting exceptions, but for the most part, it's going to be a staff member. Yeah, there wouldn't be any issue with discussing that person's identity in open session, determine whether they should be part of the closed session.
Okay. So just to make sure I understand, so from an operational perspective, putting that into practice as we're preparing to go into closed session, usually we have the superintendent or members of the administrative team joining us for that discussion. We should, as part of the vote to go into closed session, say that these, the director of finance, the director of HR, and the superintendent will join us?
Well, I if it's a past practice, for example, going into closed session to discuss strategy related to collective bargaining agreement. That case, your business manager is probably going to be part of that closed session because your business manager plays an important role in negotiating the contract. So I guess it's a common practice for those individuals to be a part of the closed session. It doesn't necessarily require a board vote. It's more so when it's an individual that traditionally doesn't attend closed sessions.
Okay.
And a request has been made for that person to attend the closed session.
Okay. There was one more that I had at the end for closed session meeting minutes. Is it recommended that we actually approve the closed session minutes in open session, or do we approve them in closed session? We've typically approved them in closed session.
Either way works. There's actually an attorney general opinion that does support approving minutes in closed session. Even with that opinion, you could still talk to some attorneys that are uncomfortable with the board acting, approving minutes in closed session. Erring on the side of complete compliance with the Open Meetings Act without any question, I've recommended to approve the closed meeting minutes in open session. Now, if there are any questions about the closed session minutes, then you would go into closed session to discuss the minutes. But any action on those minutes, I've always advised that you approve them in open session. But again, there is Attorney General opinion that does support approving the minutes in closed session.
Thank you. That was it for me.
Yep.
Going down the line, Ms. Conley? Trombley.
Back to what you just said about approving the minutes in open session. Would those be handed out to us so we would see what we would be approving?
Yes, what a lot of boards will do is they will have copies of the closed session minutes made for board members, distributed at the meeting. You're allowed to review the minutes. Once you review them, motion is made to approve them. Once they're approved, those minutes should be collected and handed back to the administration, and then the additional copies are destroyed.
Would those,
That keeps the chain of custody with the administration. So I would not advise, sending out closed session minutes in an email or posting them on a password protected webpage.
so would those be FOIAble since they're up here at the board table?
No, there's an exception in FOIA that makes them confidential.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Jennifer? Andy?
So I have a few questions,
Okay.
kind of going in order of your slides. I like the first page where it mentions to promote openness in government, the Open Meetings Act should be construed broadly in favor of openness. An exception should be construed narrowly, with the public body bearing the burden of proving the applicability of an exception. So I like that. Under page 2, middle slide, closed meeting requirements. Even when a school board is permitted to conduct a closed meeting, Open Meetings Act prohibits taking any action during the closed meeting. Can you provide just some examples of what would be, from your vantage point, examples of actions that would be taken in a closed session that should be taken in an open meeting related to a closed session?
All right. So the example would be you're in closed session addressing a controversial student discipline matter, and you've deliberated on that issue, and then the chair indicates, okay, we all need to be on the same page on this issue. I would like this to be a, if not a unanimous vote, close to unanimous vote, a show of hands. Where do we stand on expelling this student? That would be making a decision in closed session. Now, there isn't anything that prohibits folks from sharing their opinion in closed session on how they may feel on a particular matter, but that shouldn't be facilitated by the board president.
So Brad, if you could, that's a really good example. And just in the spirit of making sure we're aligned with the guidance you're providing. So if we play that forward, assume we meet in closed session to discuss the discipline associated with a student. I think we're all in agreement we would never, per your earlier guidance and even prior to tonight, publicly disclose the name of a student or even share information that would allow someone in the public to associate a specific individual with the action we're taking. So I think we're aligned on preserving the confidentiality of the student or any individual that's involved in the closed session discussion. We come back to an open meeting. Can you just provide guidance then on, assuming what you just described happens, we have good discussion, we come back into open session and we want to take action, how would we be taking action on that particular example that we discussed in the closed session?
Well, you would, when it comes to an expulsion, I recommend kind of a bifurcated approach to it. You first take action on whether the student is guilty of what they're accused of doing. And you refer to the student by a number. Student 2023-4. So it'll be the fourth student that's come before the board, for possible expulsion this year. And you indicate I move by preponderance of the evidence that the student is found, the board has found that the student committed what they're accused of doing. All those in favor support. And the resolution will be a little more specific than this. I'm just kind of going off the top of my head. So
No, it's
once the
helpful.
board determines that by preponderance of the evidence, the student did what they're accused of doing, then you would go in the next phase, determining the penalty associated with the discipline. And there are like 3 discipline factors that you
Yep.
have to consider. Well, you consider the student's discipline history, you consider the student's age, multiple other factors. And then based on those factors, and then applying your student code of conduct, a motion would be made to either suspend for a certain amount of days, expel, or possibly permanently expel if it's one of those offenses that require a permanent expulsion. I do have this process outlined in a document that has student discipline hearing procedures. I'd be happy to share that with the board so you can see how I have it written out as far as what I'm describing here.
What you just outlined makes perfect sense, and I appreciate you sharing that. I guess I have one more related question to this subject before moving to the next one. So if we were to shift from students to a staff member or employee of the district, and we were to go into closed session to have a discussion related to an employee of this district, a teacher, and determine in closed session to hire an investigator to investigate the teacher, when we come back to open session, would we have conversation, again, preserving the confidentiality of the district employee, referring to that employee by number or whatever method there is that we ultimately employ to preserve confidentiality? But in the open session, we would have discussion around the action that we as a board are taking based on the conversations that we had in the closed session. Is that align with your guidance?
Yeah, and with staff members, it's more about preserving the due process of the staff member. Generally, staff members don't have much confidentiality protection as students do. Students receive their confidentiality from FERPA. You don't have a similar law that applies to staff, but you want to ensure that your staff members receive due process during any type of investigation, during any type of possible discipline. And if you identify that staff member in an open meeting prior to the investigation, prior to discipline, it could jeopardize due process, but that's a pretty factually specific issue.
Thank you. That's very, very helpful. On the third page, the top slide, legitimate purposes for closed sessions. It says Section 8A of the Open Meetings Act permits closed sessions to consider the dismissal, suspension, or disciplining of a school district employee or school board member if the named person requests a closed hearing. And so I guess the question I have for you is, where is it documented if the individual formally requested a closed hearing? Where would that be documented? In other words,
there isn't any precedent that provides guidance on that issue. If your superintendent is recommending possible discipline against the staff member, and that is presented to the board for a closed meeting, and the staff member has verbally asked for a closed session, whether that's relayed to the superintendent or the board president, that would be sufficient. It doesn't have to be documented or notarized. Just a request for a closed session, whether it's in writing or it's a verbal request.
and would it be fair to say if that request is made, to your point about the open meeting discussion, the open portion of the meeting where the board has a discussion, there would be reference in the open meeting on the record to, I've been notified by the staff member that there would be a request for a closed session? Or no?
Yeah, and I actually have a document that where a staff member could have a standing request, and this relates more to complaints. So let's say you have a complaint that comes up against a staff member during a board meeting, and the staff member isn't there to request a closed session. You could at the beginning of the year when staff members are filing all their paperwork for that school year, you could have them file a standing closed meeting request. So it indicate if a complaint is ever made against me in an open session, I request a closed session for the board to consider that complaint. That standing request would allow the board to go into closed session if that staff member isn't present at the meeting.
Thank you. Slide or page 6, the top slide, legitimate purposes for closed sessions. Pending litigation exception, section 8E, 4 conditions must be met to use this exception. And the third one says the exemption applies only if an open meeting would have a negative financial effect on the public body's litigation or settlement position. And my question is, who determines that? And is the criteria documented to verify that the threshold was met if questioned? So in other words, if someone uses item 3 as an exemption to go into closed session, what's the criteria and who is the individual who determines that the criteria has been met?
I think quite a bit of deference given to the public body on that one. It almost goes without saying, if you're involved in litigation, you're always looking to possibly settle that litigation. And any discussion of that litigation, it's hard to argue. If there's an open session, it's hard to argue that wouldn't impact the public body's settlement position. So there is zero guidance from the courts on this issue because it's never been challenged. As far as I know, a public body has never been challenged on that element of the pending litigation exception.
Page 7, legitimate, top slide, legitimate purposes for closed sessions. Section 8H of the Open Meetings Act permits closed meetings of a public body to consider material exempt from discussion or disclosure by state or federal statute, and it references attorney-client privilege. We as a board have met frequently and used attorney-client privilege as means of going into closed session. And I'm just wondering what, again, criteria exists to prevent abuse of using attorney-client privilege as means of going into closed session. Again, to err on the side of maintaining and promoting transparency with the public body.
So I'm going to tell you, your board is not alone in going into closed session for that reason. That's probably the most popular reason. While a school board or any public body for that matter goes into closed session. And I guess tied to that issue, I mentioned about the case going into closed session and identifying particular litigation where you have to identify the case when you're involved in pending litigation. You're going to closed session for that reason. There was a similar claim made in regard to the attorney-client privilege exception. Plaintiffs indicated that you should have to indicate, the purpose of the attorney-client privilege or the content that's involved in the written attorney-client privilege document, and the court didn't take it that far. So you don't have to indicate, the reason or the content of that attorney-client privilege document. Just simply has to meet the attorney-client standard. where you've shared facts with your attorney. You wish to receive an opinion on what the board should do in applying legal guidance to those facts. If it's in writing and shared with the board, that will be subject to the attorney-client privilege and would allow you to go into closed session. So again, there's not much precedent on this issue. If the document that's subject to the attorney-client privilege, it would not be subject to disclosure under FOIA. That document allows you to go into closed session under that exception.
Thank you. Last question.
Okay.
Page 8, the middle slide, referring to confidential information. This is a subject that we've actually had a lot of discussion as a board about. And again, just looking for guidance from you, Brad. One of the things that you mentioned, and it's something that has been referenced amongst the board, is the criteria around anything discussed in closed session. So I actually wrote it down. So anything discussed, but yet we flip back to the front of the slide deck and where I started to promote openness in government, the Open Meetings Act should be construed broadly in favor of openness. We talked through the different questions, or you, and some of the questions I posed to you about maintaining confidentiality. So like as an example, the example of the student in discipline, not divulging or sharing any confidential information regarding a student. And then the example I asked you about was if in fact a staff member were to be investigated, a teacher were to be investigated, there's clearly aspects of the discussion in closed session we would maintain in confidentiality. But it's my understanding there's also significant parts of the closed discussion that would ultimately be part of the dialogue we have as a board and the actions that we take in our open meeting on the public record. And again, I'm asking for clarification because it's something that has come up.
Well, it's a good question. My guidance is definitely from a risk management perspective. So while you're focusing on transparency, I think, most of the 90% of the requirements relating to the Open Meetings Act is about being transparent. However, the 10%, which was discussed in closed session, a little bit reversed. That's more about preserving the confidentiality of the closed session. So if I'm providing risk management guidance to a school board or superintendent, I'm going to say, if something was discussed in closed session, it should not be shared with a third party or third person that was not part of that closed session. I don't want to see an Open Meetings Act violation. Now, one would argue sharing information could be transparent, but again, we're talking about a requirement under the Open Meetings Act that requires closed minutes to be confidential. And that requirement has been interpreted both by the Attorney General and by the courts to not just cover the physical minutes, but to cover any discussion that occurs in that closed session. Now, there may be discussion that wouldn't be subject to that confidentiality, not considered to be part of the closed session minutes, but it's hard for me to devise what that may be.
So I guess maybe asking the question a different way, Brad.
What's discussed in closed session should be kept confidential.
If no action is taken in the closed session, and all action associated with subjects discussed in a closed session must be made public, how is it possible to take action on issues discussed in closed session without discussing, with preserving confidentiality of the individuals involved, the actions that are being taken as a result of what was discussed in closed session?
Well, you can certainly deliberate in closed session. You just can't make a decision. So all those discussions, all those deliberations should occur in closed session.
Correct.
And in issues where you're preserving confidentiality in the open portion of the meeting, it just should be the motion, second, and vote. And if it's student, you keep the student's identity confidential with a number. If it's a staff member and the investigation has been completed and there's no, element of due process involved here, you would identify the staff member, in that motion to either discipline or terminate.
Have we done that? Have we referenced staff members in open session related to? Yeah.
No.
So the example would be, let's say you're terminating a tenured teacher and administration makes a recommendation to the board bringing tenure charges against that teacher. Now, initially that could be discussed in closed session at the request of the tenured teacher. But once you come out in the open session, you have to identify that teacher who the board is pursuing tenure charges against.
Yeah, I don't believe we do that in Brighton.
Yeah, we haven't had anybody up for tenure charges.
But
So
just beyond tenure charges, any discipline related matter? Roger?
Not all discipline comes to the board,
No.
does it? Dr. Outlaw, not all.
I don't
I
think
mean,
any discipline, unless it follows the
most
collective bargaining.
discipline doesn't come to the board.
Is that intentional?
It's part of our policies and, yeah.
So then the public's never made aware of it.
Of a disciplinary decision?
Correct. If it never reaches the board table and enters the public body, the public is unaware of any of that.
as far as discipline,
Yes.
the only discipline that's going to come to the board is in the case of a tenure charge. That's the only thing that you would be doing in a closed session.
So again, any discipline related matter in Brighton area schools outside of what you've just referenced never makes it to the board table and never is ultimately put into the public record. The public is unaware of it.
No, there's student discipline, your appeals for expulsions and some of those. There's things within policy where it does come to the board. So
Student discipline?
student discipline, there are things within the board policies where it does come to the board. Typically, it's an appeal. And those would be ones that I think that Mr. Banasek is talking about would be probably more
I'm just-
appeals than anything with the board.
So regarding student discipline, my son's name was on a kill list in Brighton area schools with teachers of this district. The student involved that wrote their names on a kill list was disciplined. Did that discipline matter make it to the board table?
No,
Okay,
that's not it's done by administration.
not something for the public to
Discipline.
be aware of?
It is a disciplinary that's done by administration.
Okay,
Student discipline, correct.
that's all my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Benasek, I just have a couple of follow-up questions. Most of the questions I had have already been asked and answered through the other board members. The first question I have is sort of a follow-up to question that Mr. Storm asked. If you have a written attorney-client communication, that's the basis for going into a closed session, and the attorney-client communication is giving advice on action that the administration or that the district should be taking, and the recommended action is not something that requires board approval. That's something that can be done within the authority of the administration, but the administration nonetheless wants to bring the attorney-client recommendation to the board in closed session for feedback regarding any potential concerns. But at the conclusion of that meeting, if the administration then proceeds forward to take action doesn't require board approval, that's based upon whatever attorney-client communication has been given, the board is under no obligation, as I understand it, and clarify for me, to come out in open session and vote on some direction that would be the basis for the superintendent going forward. Is that correct?
That is correct. There is never a requirement to take action after a closed session. And one thing to keep in mind is that the board is the client on all attorney-client privilege documents. Your attorney, while your attorney works closely with your superintendent, the board is still the client. So yeah, it's not unusual, for a superintendent to want to discuss an attorney-client privilege document with the board in closed session because the board is the client. But under policy, the superintendent may be authorized to make the decision pursuant to that information and guidance that's discussed in that attorney-client privilege. But certainly, superintendent, other administrators can have a conversation with the board in closed session on that written opinion, because the board is the client.
Okay, thanks. The final question I have is in discussing the pending litigation basis for going into closed session, does the scope of litigation encompass administrative proceedings? In other words, non-actual court cases. So if there's a civil rights administrative proceeding pending, is that within the scope of the pending litigation exception?
Yes, Title IX complaint would fall under that exception. A unfair labor practice claim filed with the Michigan Employment Relations Commission would fall under that as well. Probably the only thing that would be covered would be a grievance. So if you have a bargaining unit member filing a grievance, that wouldn't be considered to be pending litigation.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Anybody else have any other questions? Nope. All right, Mr. Banasek, thank you very much for being here this evening. We appreciate it. It was very informative and helpful. And if we have any follow-up questions after this session, we can perhaps just forward them by email.
All right, that sounds good. Thank you for allowing me into your meeting tonight. Apologize for the early technical difficulties. Glad I got that straightened out, and have a good rest of the meeting.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Everyone who joined us here a few minutes ago, thank you for being here at the meeting. We started this meeting at 6 o'clock with a work session that just concluded. So we are going to continue with the next item on our agenda, which is the superintendent report. And the first item is item A, strategic plan. Dr. Outlaw.
Just give us a moment. We've got some presenters that are going to come up here and hook things up here, getting to the technical. While they're doing that, I'm going to do a quick introduction.
Just pop in here, and if you just switch over to podium would be perfect. So we had a strategic plan, as we know, about a year ago. We had about 50 people. We had students, staff, parents, administrators that worked together to create a 5-year vision for the district. The board approved that in June of last year, and we've been working on this ever since. What we're looking at doing is presenting on different components of the strategic plan in some of our meetings coming up. We're going to have one component today that we're going to look at. But before that, I'm wondering, we have 2 of our student leaders that are here. Would it be okay if I brought them forward just to introduce themselves to the board? Because they've been really important to the team. Nate and Caitlin, are you willing to come on up here real quick and just be introduced? I'd love to introduce, because they have been absolutely fantastic, and they've been great idea generators. And if you come around, if you don't mind, just introduce yourself and what grade you're in and things like that.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Castillo. I'm a junior at Brighton High School, and I've been part of the strategic planning committee for the culture section of it for about a year now.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Hi, my name's Nate Stark. I'm a sophomore at Brighton High School, and I've also been working with the culture component of the 5-year plan for about a year now.
Thank you. Thank you both. And they're going to come back. We have kind of a tentative schedule. I'd like to have them come back, if it's okay with you. We're going to have them come back to present on some of those culture ideas that they've been really instrumental in at a future meeting. Very excited to introduce 2 more people here. One of our aspects of the strategic plan has to do with career awareness and prep. Specifically, it's Pathway 1, Goal 2, Strategy 1. BAS will infuse within the curriculum continuum career awareness and preparation while creating opportunities for students to focus on their future. This is specifically working to build connections between what's going on in the classroom and our students' future and their future career pathways. And I'm really excited by one of the programs that connects with this, but it really came from these two people. Some great ideas dealing with a program called Lunch and Learn. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to two outstanding people here. We have Hillary Feister-Bell, who's a district parent, and we have Tracy Richards, who's one of our principals at the high school level. So thank you so much for presenting.
Thank you. Yes, we are very excited. Come on, Hillary. So as he said, we have our career readiness series and we named it Lunch and Learn. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight to give you an idea of how we structured it, the presenters that we had there, and some of our outcomes. So the objective of the program, which he touched upon, Dr. Outlaw touched upon a little bit, but is to expose our students to a variety of post-secondary pathways and to increase the probability of success of our BAS strategic plan, specifically targeting our career awareness and preparation. So these are some of the components of our strategic plan.
So I'm going to go into kind of the nuts and bolts of the program, kind of a blueprint overview for you of the structure we put in place for this initial pilot series that was in place beginning in fall of this past school year. So the Lunch and Learns are just as they sound. They run over all 3 lunch periods. Initially, we started with one speaker scheduled on the last Wednesday of each month. So when a speaker comes in, they're speaking to 3 separate groups over 3 different lunch periods. They meet with 3 separate groups of kids. To give you an idea of numbers, upon completion this May, actually last week, we hosted a total of 12 speakers across both semesters. And we had, happy to say that we had a lot of positive momentum in the second semester as we went along. We kind of learned as we went. So we ended up with 3 speakers scheduled in the first semester, and then we had 9 in the second semester. Just to give an idea of the forum, the Lunch and Learns are open to all students during the lunches. Students could go to the cafeteria, grab their lunch, and then come down and meet us in the designated room in the STEAM Center, or a component of the STEAM Center, the Health Ops classroom, or the collaboration lab. And with that, I would note that a majority of the sessions, a vast majority of the sessions were held in the STEAM Center. As far as, so let me go back to the snacks. So we did have snacks and refreshments. I'm kind of building on the lunch part of it. Most kids did bring down their lunch, but they had something kind of to add to it, should they like. Attendance varied per session. I would say it averaged between 25 to 50 per day. So that would be collectively across all 3 lunch periods on average over the year. And then this is kind of building on the momentum. For some sessions, we kind of learned as we went. And then working with staff, they kind of would align classroom attendance with the type of topic that was being presented for the Lunch and Learn. So for example, if we had an engineering related career topic, Sir Jordan might take half of his, AB classroom during 4th hour to send them down to be able to come see the session. Mr. Delaney, the same, if we had a particular speaker that was related to auto tech, and he allowed his students as a classroom to come over for the Lunch and Learn. So that kind of helped build our momentum, get the word out. And I think we started to see a little bit of increased attendance after we implemented that. So we will bring the Lunch and Learns to life here with a couple of pictures and the list of speakers.
Yep. So here were some of the career topics that were covered by our speakers. We had law enforcement, computer science, business entrepreneur, health ops and physical therapy, aviation, engineering, machine trades, business and finance, military, MSU Women in Engineering came out to talk to our kids, physician, marketing and public relations, environmental engineering and environmental science, and then fiscal resources for teens turning 18. So this was an informational Lunch and Learn that we just had mainly for our seniors, but we actually had quite a few juniors and sophomores that stopped by too. So that was good. Here, just a glimpse into what our Lunch and Learns looked like. So for law enforcement, we had some members of the Brighton Police Department. For business and entrepreneur, we had the owner and founder of America's Most Wanted 4x4, which was really cool. So you can see in the STEAM Center, they brought some of the vehicles right in through the garage doors. So that was really great. Our kids really liked that. For computer science, we had from Ford Motor Company and Comerica Bank, a global IT director. From health occupations, we had a physical therapist. In aviation, we had a commercial airline pilot. We had several branches of the military present. In the medical profession, we had a physician, and she used the health oc room, which was really kind of cool for our students to see that as well. So that was a nice experience. For marketing and public relations, we had an MSU professor. And then here are some of the outcomes.
Yeah, so building on some of the nice pictures that we have, this is kind of the meat of what came out of this year to share with you. Beginning on the impact on students. I think there's a number of them, but I just tried to pull out the ones that I kind of took note of, maybe consistently across the speakers. It certainly provided an additional forum to learn about the curriculum offered at the high school. Particularly relevant to their career interests. So if we had a speaker come in, let's say for engineering or computer science, actually, we had a lot of students ask, well, do I need higher math for that, or what do I need to take if I'm looking at computer science? You know, so it started those discussions, and I think one of the key goals of the program was to kind of connect the dots so that they can start to build a more solid line to their career interests. Another, I think, nice outcome was that the speakers consistently shared what I call lessons learned, you know, that they learned in their own career path when they were going through their journey, when they started out at 17, 18 years old. Many of them picked up from that point of their life, and that was very relatable for the students to show how far they came and some of the obstacles they overcame. Most people in your career don't have a straight line of how you got to where you are now. So I think that put a real human component to it to kind of connect and say, you know, here are some things that I had to deal with. So we had speakers that talked about overcoming adversity, a lot of emphasis on critical thinking skills, talking about a strong work ethic, doing things completely and with quality, no matter how small the task, to show that you can then take on a larger task, working in teams, and working in global teams. That came up quite a bit. So you're not just working in, you know, maybe with a small group here in Livingston County, but you're working globally, you know, across countries. And that's kind of a new concept for someone, you know, at that age group. Probably one of the most important, I think maybe memorable things is a greater understanding of the current job market. One that comes to mind is the aviation. We had a commercial pilot come and speak, and I think it's probably fairly common knowledge to know that field is really in need of, you know, training more pilots to go into that field. So the job market was touched upon in probably just about every one of our speakers' talks, and I think that helped to kind of, you know, make it real, that you know, for the students, that they could actually make this happen and make a reasonable living. So the students became, I think in some cases, more familiar with the STEAM Center itself and related curriculum offerings. So if a student was coming down, for example, when the physician came and was maybe thinking about medicine, we would quite often, if there was a question about curriculum, we could kind of insert that, you know, there's some new offerings coming next fall. The pre-medical science course, the intro to machining course came up when we had Ty Summit come and speak, and they do metal stamping for the automotive industry out in Howell. So we just tried to literally connect the dots to some of these newer curriculum offerings that are coming up. And I think that was helpful for some students to, again, get the gears turning and start thinking a little bit more solidly about their coursework. Community connections were also kind of a broader outcome of that. We have now, I think, additional opportunities for the students in some of these career fields that the speakers came from. We had some that I think overlapped and came to our job fair. So they would say, hey, you know, if you want to try this out, we're offering summer jobs. That's a perfect way, you know, to do something for maybe just a couple months and try it out. Internships, field trips. I know one of our speakers did already arrange for a field trip to come after they came. So the whole class, I believe, went to visit on site. So those type of things, in addition to other, kind of our bank of job shadow type contacts that we already have, we're just kind of building on that to have additional resources for the students. New connections, same thing maybe between the high school and the professionals and the extended local community. And then I also wanted to also add that the feedback from the speakers themselves has been extremely positive. So a lot of the speakers, and probably most, had never even been to the high school, and so let alone the STEAM Center. So they had an opportunity to come into the STEAM Center, and I think not only to see the utility of the building, but I think it made an impression on how we were using the building for this particular series to kind of link in the students to their physical space as well as link into the coursework.
And we posted after each one a thank you to the speakers that came on social media, and that really sparked a lot of interest. And so we have lots of speakers lined up for next year already. So that was great. So we were very excited about that.
Yep, and just I think building on that, just a quick note of appreciation. I think for allowing us to start this series. Acknowledgement to all the speakers, of course, that took time. It takes time to prepare a talk and kind of pare down your whole career into 15 minutes for the high school level is not easy to do. But we certainly, a handful of our parents in the district, they're not all just, kind of a secondhand connection. We had definitely a handful. And then as Tracy said, we built on our base. I think the social media helped. The word of mouth, parents would read in the newsletter and they say, hey, can I come to a talk? I have something of interest that might be good for the students. So it really built on itself, I think, with the positive communication. Thank you to Dr. Outlaw for unwavering support from day one. This was a conversation that started about this time last year. And likewise, folding in Tracy and Gavin Johnson into the conversation, 100% supportive from day one to help the Career Readiness Initiative. And then just a last quick note to our students. This is for them. We have amazing students in the district. It's really a privilege, I think, to bring this series to them. I watch the kids, whether they're freshmen or seniors, they ask thoughtful, appropriate questions. They have good energy about their futures and their thinking. And I think this was just a nice way for them to kind of informally engage with some professionals in the community. And so looking forward to building on it for next year.
Thank you, Hillary, for organizing this and getting this done and following through on it. Appreciate it. So how much time did the speaker actually speak to the kids? I mean, because by the time they get their lunch, they come down there. Lunch is what, 20 minutes or 35 minutes or something like that?
30 minutes. And so we usually started about 5 minutes into the lunch period. They talked for about 15 minutes or so. And then the students had a good 5 minutes or so to ask questions or just have personal conversations with them.
But it's what,
So-
20 minutes worth of interaction, maybe 25 at the most?
25 at the most, yeah.
Is there
It depends.
anything-
Sometimes they would ask questions during, so we would just run the whole session.
So who funds the refreshments and the drinks?
It was split. We had PTO support and then we had school support.
So the teachers are paying for this? Did you say?
No. We
The
had
PTO.
PTO support, yes.
But the district's not paying for it.
We had a mix of support for the snacks.
So,
Because it grew in scope.
well, my
So we
my
kinda
point
started
being
out
is,
Support you.
my point being is, I don't think the PTO should be funding what you're doing for our kids to help them down the road, right? I think that should be a line item in our budget that we fund them here, even to the point where I'd like to see lunch brought in so they have more than 25 minutes sitting down there, right? That they can come in, they can eat, and that the district funds it with our money. Because I think it's a very important thing that you're doing, and I really appreciate that. So as much time as possible for those kids to be in there, the better, in my opinion.
Likewise, thank you for the comment.
Just one item to maybe consider. I know I won't mention the specific board members by name, but a few of us have had conversation on ways we could get programming like this into the curriculum. So we have dedicated hours where a student that was interested could, on a defined basis, go into a full hour and be part of this type of programming. I think what you've started and what you're doing is wonderful. I'll share offline with Dr. Outlaw some examples of current programs I'm personally involved in outside of Brighton area schools, at MIT out in Cambridge, Massachusetts, through the Capillary Manufacturing Council in Lansing, in LCC. And there's a lot of interest in industry to support this type of programming, including formal sponsorships from interested companies that want to be part of what you started. So kudos to you for getting it going. It's
Yeah,
wonderful.
We're looking forward to growing it. Thank you.
Scott.
I was able to attend a few of the lunch and learns, and it was, I thought it was great. And you guys did a good job, and the speakers were really good also. But one that I didn't see on the slide is the U of M solar car racing team. They came with a full
Yeah, so that
accompaniment.
wasn't a lunch and learn. That was something that Mr. Jordan had them come out.
Different?
Yeah, that was separate,
Okay.
but it was really great. Yep.
But that was a nice presentation as well. But a lot of people are contributing, so let's keep up the good work. But I thought it was a great success to get started. So thank you.
Anybody else?
Can
Yes.
can I make just a request? It would be great if we as a board could fully sponsor your activity. And I would like to just ask if it would be possible to receive through Dr. Outlaw guidance on what it would take to fully sponsor this initiative as a district. So all the lunches, any logistics associated with it. I'd love to put that in front of the board and let us vote on that.
Keep that in mind.
Well, I just, Dr. Outlaw, if you want to add anything further, I just wanted to say thank you both for being the visionaries to lead this initiative. Obviously, just, the early returns are obviously remarkable. And it's great to see our students be able to benefit from this program. And given how successful it certainly seems to have been already, I think there's no question that you will continue to have the full support of the administration and the board, certainly, to continue to brainstorm and grow it. I think it's even something, obviously, the focus has been on the high school. It'd be great to be able to, it would probably look a little different, but in some fashion, push it down into the younger levels. They certainly, as they start thinking about what kind of career paths they may be interested in, it might help form the decision-making that they have as far as electives. And obviously the Health Ox program has just really taken off. And, if we have students that start thinking about, that as a career option, even at an earlier age, by participating in this type of an initiative, it would inure to their benefit and would, continue to take us to the next level. So, yeah, kudos to you. Thank you for all of your hard work, and we appreciate and look forward to the continued success of the program and the growth of the program.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just final comment on it. Thank you so much. This is part of that strategic planning work. So thank you for taking it and running with it. That we also have a subcommittee on career awareness and preparation that both Hillary and Tracy are part of. And next month in June, I'm planning on coming back and have another group of people talk about some exciting things that are being done at the other levels on some of these same type of topics. So the vision on this is that we'll just have little tidbits of strategic plan things each month, just to keep the board and community aware of some of the things that are going on. So thank you again. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
all your work, and thanks to our student leaders and everyone. Okay, just the other part of this superintendent report was state budget proposals. There's a lot of things that are going on in Lansing that will directly connect with next month, talking about the budget hearings. And Mr. Engleter is just going to give you a snapshot of some of the things going on in Lansing.
Just a quick update. Following the January consensus revenue estimating conference, the governor came out with her budget proposal in early mid-February timeframe. We waited a long time for the House and the Senate to finally put out theirs. They did so at the end of April, finally came out with theirs. Considering they're all democratically run, I anticipated that things would be pretty close on all three proposals. I think they're, looking at it, the governor came out with the 5% increase on the foundation allowance. The House then came out with a 4% increase, and the Senate came out with a 6% increase. So I think you can see where that kind of coalesces in the long run. I think it probably ends up in that 5% range because they've all put their proposals out there, and now it'll go to conference committee to try to come up with an actual state aid bill. But what we were waiting for after they put those out, the consensus revenue estimating conference for May was held last Friday. So we were waiting to see what the state revenue estimates look like, because there's been a lot of legislative changes over the last couple of months, particularly related to tax changes. So we did see that consensus revenue estimating conference on Friday. The state as a whole was looking at about $1 billion less than what they were anticipating in January. Now, breaking that down, most of that, almost all of it, was related to those tax changes. You had 4 or 5 big tax changes, 3 big ones being the individual income tax rate for next year will roll back from 4.25 down to 4.05. They did make sweeping changes in the earned income tax credit that raised that. And then the retirement tax, they had some rollbacks on that stuff. So there's less tax revenue coming in. Now, the majority of those tax changes were all directed at the general fund and not at the school aid fund. There was a concerted effort to hold school aid harmless on those tax changes. But that being said, the school aid fund actually came out, they revised the estimates up a little bit for this year, about $140 million. They went up next year about $40 million for the projection, and then the following year at about $8 million up. And that was after all the economists spoke and talked about how things were moving. So with that, I think based on what we saw there, that the school aid fund is not really affected in those revenue estimates. I think we will see in the next 2 to 3 weeks, they'll probably come together with a conference report. I think their plan is still to have a bill enacted by July 1st. We'll see if that really happens or not. But we will be putting together, based on that, our estimates and finishing up the budget. We will be having a finance committee meeting on the 1st of June. And then we'll be bringing back for a budget hearing on June 12th here at the board table and looking to enact that budget moving forward for next year.
Thank you, Mr. Angleton. All right, is that it, Dr. Ella? All right, that concludes the superintendent report portion of our agenda and moves us into the call to the public. At this time, anyone that would like to address the board has the opportunity to do so. You will be allotted 3 minutes of time to address the board. The process that we utilize is there are cards in the rear of the room. We ask that you fill out a card, place it in the box to the left of Dr. Mosier, and absolutely. So we will postpone temporarily the call to the public. No, that's okay.
Hi, my name is Sina Van Dam Sinks, and I'm a senior at the Bridge. And I just wanted to share a few things of what's been going on. Last Thursday, May 18th, we had a basketball game against Lincoln High School from Ossawa. Although we lost by 1 point, the teams had a great time, and we look forward to more games. Also, last Thursday, Ms. Poshma took 2 of our leadership students to Mayo Stars College and career competition at Delta College. They won 2nd place for the school banner and 3rd place for the Genius Kit. Tomorrow, we are hosting our career day from 10 to 11:30. We have many different professionals coming in to share and represent their industries with students. Our graduation will be held June 8th at 6 p.m. at the BCPA. On May 11th, 7 of our students went to a college career road trip with other county alternative students. They went to Eastern, WCC, and to an electric trade school in Chelsea. Thank you for your time, and have a great night.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here this evening and giving us the update on behalf of the Bridge. So again, at this time, we will have the call to the public portion of our agenda. If anyone would like to address the board, please fill out a card and place it in the box. I will read the name of the individual who will be speaking, and I will also then read the person who will be next in order to help keep the process moving. When you have 30 seconds left in your time allotted, Ms. Marks will give you a yellow card, giving you that warning. And then when your 3 minutes is up, she will raise the red card, and that will indicate that your time has concluded. So with that said, I will turn to the cards that I currently have. And the first one is Lisa Geis, and Sarah Ross will be next.
Good evening, board. Thank you for having us Horning teachers tonight. We're kind of spotlighting. And so I just wanted to start by saying, I mean, we have a wonderful staff at Horning. It has been a pleasure to work there I'm going on, this is my 26th year at Horning. So I just wanted to spotlight something that we've been doing in fourth grade at Horning for the past 5 years now. We do something called Genius Hour, and I know even some of former students that I've had, board members, have been participants of this. And it was originated by Google to give their employees 20% time to do something innovative that would be a passion that they wouldn't normally have time to do. And it is very difficult to find the time to do this in the elementary school day, but I have found it to be very beneficial for kids to be able to have that time and the autonomy to do something that they're passionate about. And in the end, they present something. It can be, they're learning how to do, they want to study gemstones, and then they want to make a website. And I'm like, well, you've got to figure out how to do the website. So they have to learn how to do that, and they teach themselves, and the research time is great. And then in the end, they do, I've had roller coasters, and I've had like little roller coasters with marbles, not like real roller coasters, but engineering projects and many websites and 3D models. And it's been wonderful. It's very exciting to see the kids get excited when I say it's Genius Hour time, and it's never an hour. It's like, I fit it in when I can, but the kids love that. They're like, yes. And when they're researching and they're engaged in what they're doing, it's great. So it's just a highlight that we do at Horning in fourth grade. And I'm happy to talk to you about it more if you'd like more information, but thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. After Ms. Ross will be Bonnie Majinski.
Hi, folks. Good evening. I'm Sarah Ross. I also teach at Horning. This is my 31st year with the district. I know a lot of staff are going to be highlighting some wonderful things that we do at the elementary level. So I was thinking I wanted to highlight someone we have in the central office who I just have tremendous respect for, and that's Liz Mosier. But here's why. Over the course of my career, what is considered best practice and appropriate curriculum, and what we know, the science of how children learn, it has evolved over the course of my career. And Liz really has a vision that I appreciate for making sure that Brighton is always on the cutting edge of best practice. So obviously in my career, I've served on a lot of interview teams. And the last one, I was just shocked by experienced teachers coming from other communities wanting to teach in Brighton, and the materials they were familiar with and the practice that they were discussing was something we did a decade ago, 15 years ago. And it really gave me an appreciation, Liz, for not only the curriculum that we have, but all of the professional development that's been offered to the staff members who teach in our community here over the years. It's really been fantastic. So, thank you.
Next up will be Liz Urso.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Musinski. I'm here as a parent and an educator at Spencer Elementary. I have a junior kindergarten student at Horning. So Horning teachers, thank you so much for making her first year such a welcoming and warm experience. It's a warm place at Horning, so thank you. And then at Spencer, in addition to my duties as the music teacher, we have an extracurricular elementary choral group, the Spencer Singers. And we recently wrapped up our season on Saturday at our Spencer School Carnival and Auction. And as teachers, we get to celebrate in our classrooms every day a lot of small moments and small victories. And I wanted to share one from our performance on Saturday. I had a lot of featured soloists for our, we had a lot of Broadway songs. And one student, she had the big solo, a whole verse of a solo. It's a big solo. And she won that solo. She had some opportunities to practice in our rehearsals, and we practiced with the microphones. And each time she's trying out new ideas. She's trying things out. And every time she tries new things and takes these risks, she's supported by the other members of our group. And each time she's getting better and better. And then on Saturday, it was her best performance yet. And so as a teacher, I was proud of her and the growth that she was making, but also of the other members of our group for just like supporting her. And like, I could see like her face is flushed and she's nervous, but also proud of herself. And her friends are proud of her and like say, way to go. Like, I didn't mind the little bit of chatter after her solo, to like congratulate her on her job well done. So I got to have that proud teacher moment just on Saturday. I wanted to share that with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the next one will be Katie Mahalski.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. My name is Liz Urso. I'm a fourth grade teacher at Spencer. And luckily, I decided to highlight our Career Awareness Week, unbeknownst to me, of their wonderful presentation. And I just wanted to share with you a few of the things that we were able to share with our fourth grade students. So our area of study was arts and communications. And over that week of Career Week, we were able to bring in 4 wonderful speakers via Google Classroom on the internet. And they covered a variety of topics. But the most exciting one was a gentleman, a parent of Mrs. Ball's. He works for one of the big studios, and he just does the lighting for special effects on big movies like Marvel movies. And I was just amazed at, and the kids were amazed at his presentation on how he has this tiny little role as just the lighting person, how the light hits everything. And I thought that was so wonderful. We also had 2 speakers on Friday, and our culminating project was we gave the students an opportunity to decide if they could invent anything in the world. Some did shoes, some did cereals. We had them take a blank white box and they made their product. And then our 4 areas of focus where they made a commercial for their product. They made a logo, a slogan, and they wrote a newspaper article. And it was amazing to see them they just so much enjoyed that. And then we touched on how they might have a career that doesn't even exist today, which is a wonderful thing to think about because new careers are evolving all the time. So I just wanted to highlight the opportunity that we had in the elementary school this year with the Career Week to focus and give our kids the opportunity to see all the different genres of careers that are out there in the world and how new careers are evolving so rapidly as opposed to, don't want to date myself, but when I was a kid. And they were really excited about that, especially in the fields of technology and computer science and things like just being a lighting director. He broke down so many little things. The only thing I would recommend is that we move our Career Week to January or February because of M-STEP and the end of the year. It was a lot for the end of the year. But thank you so much.
Karen Troller will be next.
Before I start, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Horning teachers that are here. We're school of choice in DeBrighton. My daughter went through Horning and a lot of wonderful educators and support, so thank you for that. Tonight, I'm here to introduce myself. My name is Katie Michalski. I am the new field representative for Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin. Many of you may know Mona Shand, who previously held this position. Mona is still with the Congresswoman's office, just in a different capacity. So tonight, I'm just here to extend a hello and also just share a couple quick things. One is, again, the office is always available to assist in providing information regarding federal grant funding. And so we can help find any available grants that might be applicable to Brighton area schools. And of course, if you apply for any grant funding, we're here to provide letters of support for that funding. And then I wanted to mention a few opportunities BAS students have engaged with and have been recognized by the Congresswoman recently, and that's with the Congressional Art Competition and also the Service Academy nominations. So congratulations go out to Brighton High School student Caitlin McKenzie for her third place win in the Congressional Art Competition for the Congresswoman's District. Caitlin's piece was Friendship, which was done in graphite, and it will hang in the Congresswoman's district office in Lansing for the next year. For the competition this year, entries came from 63 students across 19 high schools in the district, which includes all of Ingham, Livingston, Clinton, and Shiawassee counties, and portions of Eaton, Oakland, and Genesee counties. I also wanted to mention that this is across the U.S. House of Representatives. Each spring, the Congressional Institute sponsors the nationwide high school art competition to recognize and encourage artistic talent in the nation and in each congressional district. Since it began in 1982, more than 650,000 students have participated. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the Service Academy nominations. 2 Brighton High School seniors were recently recognized by the Congresswoman for her nomination for their Service Academy appointment. So each congressional office is invited to nominate up to 10 candidates each year, and that's based on vacancy at the U.S. military academies, which include the U.S. Military Academy, Naval Academy, Coast Guard Academy, Merchant Marine Academy, and Air Force Academy. And in collaboration with our Service Academy Advisory Panel, a review is made, and then candidates are put forward for the Service Academies. And from Brighton High School, Samuel Kieran, hopefully I said that right. Kieran, thank you, will be attending the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, and Amelia McWilliams will be attending the Air Force Academy, and they were recently recognized by the Congresswoman. The application and nomination process for 2024 will begin later this year. So I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity to introduce myself and to recognize a few of the many outstanding Brighton area school students. Thank you.
Thank you. And then next will be Melissa O'Connor.
Hi, my name is Samantha Trower, and I'm a third grade teacher at Horning Elementary. I wanted to share a couple of exciting projects that our third graders have taken part in this year. First, during our writing unit on persuasive speeches, we had our classes taste test different flavors of candy from Oh My Lolly, and then they decided which one was their favorite and wrote persuasive speeches to the public on which flavor they should buy and why. We recorded their speeches with parent permission and posted them inside the store in downtown Brighton in Oh My Lolly. The students had so much fun writing and recording their speeches, and it was a great way to support one of our downtown businesses. I feel like here in Brighton, we really pride ourselves on having a strong sense of community, and this was one way to foster that idea even more. The second project our third graders are so excited about is something we do at the end of the year, so we're starting that right about now. It is called Mini Society. To wrap up all of our learning on economics and social studies, students are tasked with creating their own good or service to sell at 2 market days at the end of the year. We invite in families and other staff members in to shop their products, as well as students can shop other products as well. Parents have reached out to me personally, and I know other of my co-teachers as well, and said that their students have never been so excited about a project. And so I'm just very grateful for the fun and hands-on learning activities that our teachers here in Brighton Area Schools provide for all of our students, and I wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
And then next will be Erin Bellinger.
Hi, my name is Melissa O'Connor, and I teach 2nd grade at Horning. To speak to Sam's point, my 3 daughters and I went into Omailali a few weeks ago, as they always ask to do whenever we're in downtown Brighton. And they enjoyed using our phones and watching a couple of those. And we live in South Lyon, so it's far-reaching, even beyond our own small community here. I wanted to speak a little bit more, goes right along with our the strategic plan with our preparing students for their careers. We had a really big success with Career Week at the elementary level. Our PTO really worked tirelessly to have many different parents come in to speak to every different class. 2nd grade, we focused on architecture and construction, and we had 3 different presenters. Well, at first I was a little worried about having them listen intently for a full 60 minutes. They really did. And the level of questions that they had and the excitement was really wonderful to see. So to build on that excitement, Mrs. Straight's 2nd graders and mine came together. They collaborated in small groups, and they took their own try at being architects. They chose different structures that could be built out of a hat, and they worked together to think critically and make plans that they could then hand off to the construction crew as they were told in our presentation, who is an architect. And they just really loved it. So I'm excited to see how that could possibly grow in the future. And I'm just really thankful to our PTO for making that happen. Thank you.
Next will be Lisa Kogab.
Hi, my name is Erin Bellinger. I teach 4th grade at Horning Elementary. I wanted to share a small celebration that has a really big impact around our STEAM Center. Horning has recently received its Green Schools certification, which we used to have and then was lost during COVID due to just safety protocols. And the recertification is made even sweeter by the fact that it was an initiative brought to us by our students. In STEAM, they have been learning about natural resources, and so they did a paper and recycling drive throughout the school. They organized that themselves and are managing that during our enrichment period with Mrs. Salmetto. They also did a dry marker drive so that we could recycle those and send those back. And they're continuing that on, even though our enrichment is starting to end as we get closer to the end of the year. They've taken a lot of pride in that. And it fits really nicely with our 4th grade curriculum where we look at natural resources. So they've found something that they're passionate about. They're finding ways that they can impact our school and our community and make it better and taking it on themselves. So I'm just very grateful for our STEAM program and for Mrs. Salmetto for continuing to empower our students to take a passion of theirs and an interest and do something about it, even in our school. So thank you very much.
The next will be Lauren Rikes.
Hi, I'm Lisa Kokab. I'm a special education resource room teacher over at Horning. I'm also a parent. I've got a student at Malpe and a student at the high school. And it's actually really cool to be a parent in this district as well as teach, because when we moved here, gosh, 7 years ago now, I knew Brighton was good, but just once you're in it and you see the other side, it's really amazing. So I'm excited to tell you about the peer-to-peer program that we piloted over at Horning this year. Peer-to-peer is an evidence-based practice which is proven effective in increasing opportunities for students with ASD and other disabilities to access general education settings and curriculum. Typically developing peers, which we call links, participate with students with disabilities throughout the school day in both academic and non-academic settings. The links will model age-appropriate academic and social behavior. Peer-to-peer has shown improved outcomes in the areas of independence and socialization for students with disabilities. And as students with disabilities and link students learn about one another and develop trust, we are starting to see outcomes ranging from decreased anxiety, an increased sense of belonging and confidence, an increased level of engagement in the school community, and friendships that are extending beyond the school building. There are reciprocal benefits for the link students as well. As they're learning to relate to individuals with different needs, they develop problem solving and communication skills. They become leaders in compassion and tolerance. They set an example of mindset and inclusivity, and they often demonstrate an increased level of engagement in their school community. Brighton Area Schools has seen the incredible outcomes of the peer-to-peer program through links at Brighton High School. I'm excited that my son, Ben Kokab, who will be a senior in the fall, has all signed up to be in the links program. I know that there are other peer-to-peer programs throughout our buildings in Brighton. I came from Hawkins. This is my first year at Horning, and Hawkins has a very strong peer-to-peer program. Through our collaboration between our resource teachers, our general education teachers, the LESA staff, and the financial support and awareness that came from our PTO, we were able to pilot the peer-to-peer program throughout the 3rd grade this year. And recently, we even extended it into identified students in 2nd grade. We're planning on expanding the program school-wide next year. And one of the coolest stories that I think I could share with you is we've had this student who for years has eaten lunch by himself at a table alone or played by himself. And now he's starting to eat with friends and he's playing purposefully with friends on the playground. It's been a huge collaborative effort. We've had great success. For me personally, as the parent of a student with a dual diagnosis of Down syndrome and autism, I'm thrilled to see the peer-to-peer programs growing throughout our district. And I feel so lucky to be part of a community that practices inclusion. Thank you.
And then Brandy Ward will be next.
Hello, my name is Lauren Reichs. I am 2nd grade teacher at Horning. And I'm actually the classroom that Lisa was just talking about that we're kind of piloting with some of the kids. And I can attest to what she said. It has made such a big impact just on those couple of kids in my classroom in such a short period of time already. So I'm very excited to see where it goes next year. I'm really kind of just highlighting a couple things. First, can I just say, how nice is it to have a normal school year again? So clearly lots of good things are happening as a result of that. Horning has done such a good job of just bringing so many experiences for our students and connecting with communities and parents. So from all the way starting at kindergarten, they brought their motor parent program back, which was gone before, which got to be taken away from COVID. And so this is the first year they brought it back, and it's been a great success. 1st grade had some awesome Readers Theater performances. They performed at the school for parents. They performed at the coffee shop. In 2nd grade, we are doing an end of the year picnic that parents are welcome to come to. And we're kind of doing a big celebration with all of 2nd grade, all of parents, younger siblings, things like that, to kind of just round out the school year. 3rd grade, as Sam already talked about, had their mini society. They're doing a maker's work where they build derby cars and race them. And then 4th grade has their wax museum where some parents were able to come in, see their presentations along with the passion projects that Lisa talked about as well. So it's just been a really positive year at Horning, and it just looks like we are only going to be continuing to move forward with a lot of great things. And I'm just excited for next school year already. So thank you.
And Maria Morneau will be next.
Hello, my name is Brandy Ward, and I'm also a teacher at Horning Elementary School. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I've been in the district for 20 years, and this is my first year at Horning. As you can see, I love the staff. We've got a lot of positives happening. And today I'm going to share with you the happenings in our school gym. Carly Anderson, our physical education teacher, is proud to say her students love coming to the gym every week. They have the best time. She incorporates fitness and strength into sports-specific lessons. During one unit, she was even able to involve STEAM by having her students go through the engineering process. They planned, created, tested, and improved their putt-putt golf holes, all while working together as a team. Each group used real putters at the end to try out all of the designs made by their classmates. She emphasizes core values in her teaching, such as integrity, kindness, and teamwork, while constantly teaching and reteaching what it looks like to be a good sport and a good teammate. She also loves doing team building activities, always encouraging students to work with new group members each time. In addition, Carly also teaches at least 2 enrichment classes a week. 19 girls and 20 boys have been involved in physical education enrichment for the whole year. It's been a positive experience for everyone involved. I can say all staff members and students can just feel the energy and passion that Carly creates in her gym. Thank you.
And Libby Salmetto will be next.
I'd like to say the last teacher that spoke, Carly Anderson, is the coolest gym teacher you will ever meet. She's so much fun. My name is Marilla Morneau. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Horning PTO, just to highlight some of the positive things that are happening in Horning right now. There's been, if you ever, I'm sure you guys have endured enough of the negative that comes with some of these meetings, but I would like to focus on the positive because Horning is an amazing place. So first, the new Huddles program we rolled out this year. This is a program where the students from all grade levels gather monthly in small groups to work on creating positive and meaningful relationships with peers and staff. These groups also allow the district to gather student feedback at age-appropriate levels regarding peer-to-peer relationships and will develop and/or expand programs to help students in need. So what I've seen about this program has been overwhelmingly positive. The kids are really enjoying to get to know kids from other grades, other classes, as well as getting to know other staff members that they weren't familiar with before. As a PTO member, I've been able to actually help out with the first few huddle days. My job was to help make sure kids got to the correct classroom because some of them are very small, JK, 4 years, young as 4 years old. So we want to make sure nobody got lost in the building. So I was able to watch the kids, which was really fun. One of the coolest things I saw, the 4th graders were given the responsibility of escorting a kindergarten buddy to make sure that they made it to their classroom safely and on time. And this is a buddy from their huddle. And the most adorable thing, you're watching these 4th graders, boys and girls, walking down the hallway, holding a kindergartner's hand and leading them along to make sure they get to their place safely. And they're engaging with them and asking them questions about them. And it's absolutely adorable. I have a 1st and a 4th grader at Horning, and they came home last week after huddles, and they were absolutely beaming about how much fun it was, how they had made new friends. They really adore the staff members that they're with, and they were able to explain to me, 1st and 4th grade, what it meant to be generous, which was the lesson from last week, which was amazing. One teacher had spoken about the peer-to-peer program. It's fantastic. I'm so glad as a parent that we're doing that. Let's see, it's been rolled out in the 3rd grade classroom. She covered most of that. But it's been very positive about forming new relationships within the school and students feeling supported. We've gotten our new social emotional therapy dog, Susie. She finished all of her training. She's been in the school for a month or 2 now, and she's already made a huge impact. Her picture's over here on the wall. She's absolutely adorable, and the children love her. Love, love, love her. She's been so great. They can get right in her face, lay on her, cuddle her, and she doesn't react. She just lays there and takes all the love in, and it's wonderful to see the kids with her. We have also rolled out an extended enrichment program this year, which is for all students and engages and capitalizes on their individual interests and talents. This included adding STEAM to the curriculum, which has been very positive and overwhelmingly received, which included the Green School Project, which Ms. Bellinger talked about. But I see Mrs. Salmetto's here. She's fantastic. My kids talk about her all the time. They love STEAM. Yes.
Could please just wrap up.
Okay, I'm wrapping it up. Okay, so I would just like to say, on a personal note, I'm in this building all the time because of my PTO duties. And I cannot possibly say enough about how fantastic and dedicated the teachers and staff in this building are. Working with small children can be daunting and exhausting, but these people continue to show up every day and put in the hard work of teaching and caring for our children. They deserve far more praise than they are given for doing that. Thank you.
And next will be Marilee McBride.
Hello, my name is Libby Salmetto, and I'm the STEAM teacher at Horning. That was just wonderful, so I'm kind of trying to catch my breath. This is a new position for me this year, so it's really awesome to hear positive feedback. I was going to talk about huddles, so just to reiterate a little bit, huddles is something new that we started this year at Horning, and during huddles time, all staff members are paired in small groups with children, and these groups consist of one adult and about 10 to 12 students from junior kindergarten to 4th grade. We meet once a month for 30 minutes, and our focus is on determination, optimism, generosity, and solidarity, which are the 4 components of the DOGS program. These monthly meetings have created a sense of community and camaraderie with our school. We've had positive feedbacks from students, staff, and parents. It's something we are excited to continue next year. In the fall, our huddle groups will stay the same other than our 4th graders leaving to go to Maltby and adding new students and joining kindergarten students. Thank you for your time, and as always, go Dogs.
And I have no more cards, so if anyone wanted to speak but have not filled out a card, this will be your last chance to do so.
Hi there, good evening. My name is Marilee McBride. I'm the media specialist at Spencer Elementary, and I'm talking to you tonight as a parent and an educator in the district. I was a parent here before I became an educator. My husband and I relocated from Berkeley, Michigan here 8 years ago, and when we were house hunting, we drove by Spencer and I looked at him and I said, that's where our kids are gonna go to school. That is where I will teach, and it's all come to fruition. I just wanted to reach out about an opportunity we gave our students in the library this February. We focus on kindness in our school, and we did a community outreach program for Fleece and Thank You. We do a lot of community talk here in Brighton, keeping it in Brighton, and then as the students get older, we kind of expand on that. And we took this initiative to give the opportunity for our kids to think a little bit more about others, and going with that whole generosity of our DOGS program. So students came into the library for 1 week in February where they heard a story about a hospital or a child in a hospital. It was very elementary friendly. And then we took that and students made a knot tie blanket that went to the program Fleece and Thank You, where they gave these blankets to sick kids in the hospital. So there was a story, there was a connection. We took photographs and short videos to send in with the blanket. And what happens is, when you generate this, you send it to the company, you get a specific class code that goes on the blanket, and they sterilize the blankets once we send them back. Students or the recipient then is able to watch the video or see the photos from the class that made their actual blanket to have that human connection for sick kids in the hospital. And it was great because we had so many kids say, I got a blanket like that when I was a kid because I had a surgery, or I know someone. We had staff members whose kids have received blankets like that. My son was one as a child. So it was really cool to see the connection our kids had with one another, kids who are experts on making such blankets and helping one another, and just the positive impact that they had with one another knowing that this was going to go to help another kid. And I kind of feel like that sums up Spencer and our heart. And it was just a great program. I'm excited to do it next year with the kids. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that concludes the call to the public portion of our agenda and moves us to the for action section. Item A, regular meeting minutes of May 8, 2023. Do we have a motion to approve as presented? Moved by Dr. Krebs. Support by Mr. Conley. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? And one abstention?
We don't have to do that. That's what we determined.
Oh, okay. 7-0. All right, that moves us to item B, Human Resources Report. Mr. Scaling.
Excuse me. Yes, good evening. We have two recommendations to communicate to the board this evening. Emily Harris has been with the district for 2 years, and Melissa Smith has been with the district for 3 years. We ask that you approve the Human Resources Report as presented.
All right, do we have a motion to approve the report as presented?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Reed. Supported by Dr. Krebs. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? That passes 7-0. That moves us to item C, the 2023-2024 LESA budget. We reviewed this previously at the last meeting as part of the for future action. Do we have a motion to approve the LESA budget as presented? Motion by Mr. Conley. Support by Ms. Reed. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? That passes 7-0. Item D, the resolution to designate the district's LESA election representative. This was also discussed at the last board meeting regarding the need for us to designate one of the board members to be the representative as well as an alternate. I guess I will volunteer to be the designated representative, but we'll need to include an alternate for anyone that wants to offer.
I can volunteer for that.
Okay. So do we have a motion to approve the resolution with myself as the designated representative and Ms. Reed as the alternative? Moved by Dr. Krebs.
Support.
Supported by Ms. Marks. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? That passes 7-0. Item E, the property tax L40-29. Mr. Engelter.
Yep, as discussed at the last meeting, we put together the tax rate request for this year. We do have all the information in from equalization, so put it together, you will see that we are levying 18 mills on non-homestead property for next year. We had put together a Headley override, and you see that on the middle line in 2020. The district's still sitting at about 19.5 mills, so we did not experience a Headley rollback this year, but should you hit one in the future, you're hedged out for about 1.5 mills right now. The debt millage, we did roll that back 1 mil. That's an unlimited tax pledge, and we levy whatever it takes to cover our debt service expenditures for next year. Those expenditures are down and taxable values are up. So we're actually able to roll back taxes 1 mil for next year on that debt portion. So, and I anticipate that that's going to continue to go down as we've talked about in past meetings. So that's all I have on that.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the tax levy request forms for 2023, 2024 as presented? Moved by Mr. Trombley, supported by Mr. Conley. Any discussion?
I have a quick question.
Sure, Ms. Reed.
Not so much on this, but a request for perhaps for the next meeting. I'd like to see what the current numbers are for the projections on the millage rate associated with the bonds
Sure.
over the next 10 years.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you.
So then we're voting for all of these, so you need one for each jurisdiction.
Yeah, we have to, yeah. And had there not been any property transfers between districts, we would just have one tax rate request that goes out. But because we're still dealing with one in I think it's Genoa, we have to continue to do that out until the old debt is retired, so.
All right. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? That passes 7-0. That closes the for action portion of our agenda and moves us into for future action. Item A, final budget 2022, 2023 and projected budget 2023, 2024. Mr. Engelder?
I covered most of this in my earlier discussion on the state budget, but we will be presenting the budget when it's done to the Finance Committee on June the 1st, and then we will be coming back here to the board for a budget hearing and adoption on the 12th.
All right. Any questions? All right. Next item B, appointment of representative to the LESA PAC. Mr. Scaling or Dr. Outlaw?
We discussed this at the last meeting. We have Katie Morningstar is to be appointed to serve as the district's representative to the PAC through 2026. She is currently in that role and is interested in continuing that capacity.
All right. Any questions? All right. Next item is the Troon Policy 3105, visitors and volunteers. Ms. Reed, Mr. Scaling, who'd like to talk about that?
I think, this one has been in front of the board for a while now. I think it's first showed up for future action back in April. The changes that were proposed by the policy committee grew out of discussion that we had at the board workshop. I think that was in February. And it was out of a desire to provide greater clarity on when and how visitors will be given a badge and what background checks are involved in connection with badges and volunteering in the district. And, that's where we were. I don't think we had any questions from the second meeting or the first or second meeting in April that were around this policy. I don't know if there are continuing questions about this, but hopefully we can move it to for action for the next meeting.
Any questions? Mr. Conley?
Yeah, the tie-in to, was it 3105? And it talks about required of any visitor volunteer. It was basically going to make school board members a visitor, if I recall, is how we were reading it. I have no problem with everybody that's involved in the school doing background checks and all that. We've always done that, even coaches for volunteers and all that. So what's the need to change this? Don't we do that anyway? Aren't we doing that?
My understanding, and I think what we talked about at the committee level and then here at the board during the workshop, was that we wanted to have greater clarity around when badges would be issued and what background checks would be associated with that. So for 3105, that's really focused on badges and background checks. There was a small change to section A that talked about having folks sign in when they're visitors. So that I think is consistent with what the board consensus was for how we wanted visitors to interact in buildings, how we wanted to run background checks on volunteers, which frankly is consistent with what we were already doing. It was just updating the policy to reflect that. And then to discuss the use of badges for folks that are not employees. That's the frequent visitors section for 3105 subsection C. The tie-in with the next item on the agenda, policy 2302. 2302 is the board code of conduct. And one of the things that we had in the Neola policy, and that you'll see if you look at some of the districts around us that continue to use Neola policies, as well as you look at other districts that don't use either Troon or Neola, they frequently have policies at the board level that explicitly state the board members will comply with the policies that we're promulgating for everybody else. And so that was one of the things that we had discussed at our board workshop. And then we discussed at 2 meetings for the policy committee and presented the amendment to 2302 for the board's consideration to ensure that we are holding ourselves to the same standard that we are asking others to be held to.
Okay, the difference is we're elected officials. But we still, if we're within the school, should have fall in the same, which I think everybody does, and nobody has a complaint of that. So I'm not so sure this is all a good idea in its total package. And I guess I'll wait and see what the other board members think.
Mr. Trombley?
Who wrote that, the amendment to this?
Can I sneak in real quick? It's very difficult for people to hear.
I thought I had the floor.
No, to hear, he's asking.
Can you talk into the mic? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay, it's 2302.
What you have for the proposal today is a revision that was produced by the policy committee.
Okay, so the policy committee as a whole decided to write that?
Yeah.
Andy, is that correct?
So we talked about this at the last board meeting, and we
Right.
felt in fairness to you, Ms. Reed, that we would want you to be present. So I had mentioned at the last board meeting that when I came into the policy committee meeting where this was presented, the actual proposed changes were already in a proposed state.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think that's what Bill's question was.
So when we met as the policy committee back in April, we talked about an original draft that I prepared based on a review that I had done of some policies that were in effect in other districts. We talked about it very briefly in April, and I shared a copy of that with the entire policy committee at that time. We talked about it more extensively at the May meeting, and during that meeting, each member of the committee proposed changes to it. You proposed changes to
I
it,
did.
Ms. Marks proposed changes to it, and then the committee agreed that we would present this document to the full board for review and comment and potentially for approval. So I would say what you have in front of you now is not what I drafted, it is what the committee drafted.
I guess just so it's your words, not mine, Ms. Reed. From the dialogue we had at the policy committee meeting, I just want to make sure, what do you recollect my expressed concern in the policy committee being specific to this policy?
You wanted to make sure that we were not adopting something that went beyond what we were asking our other visitors to do.
Kind of trying to, like, a backdoor attempt to restrict any board member from being able to go into a district building. And I think it was at that point of the discussion where, we had the conversation around the access to the buildings, the intent of how I personally don't have the time in my professional life to spend as much time as I wish I could within the district and taking the time that other board members do have. And my concern was we shouldn't be looking to restrict or penalize any board member from proactively being involved. And that I felt this language, it felt a lot like we were trying to, to John's comments, why are we changing it? It felt like there's this kind of underlying current to restrict, and I don't want to restrict.
I certainly respect your position there. And I will say the original draft that was not presented for the board because it did not meet the full committee's approval included language that required board members who wanted to conduct board business on district property to clear that with the superintendent or with the building principal before they arrived. And you expressed objections over that. And in deference to your objections, what the committee has presented here doesn't require any of that pre-clearance. It simply asks that we board members sign in as visitors when we are coming to the buildings. That's it. So you still have the ability to go to the building. Any of the board members have the ability to present themselves at the front office of any of the buildings in the district and enter as a visitor. I think that meets the expectation that you expressed at the committee meeting. If it doesn't, and you've changed your mind on further reflection, I respect
On
that.
the record at the last meeting, I stated publicly that I do appreciate your honesty and transparency through the process. So There's no dispute on my end as it relates to what you just articulated.
Okay.
So we wanted you to be here so you could share that with the public.
Mr. Trombley.
So why would we have badges then? Do the other badge people need to check in with the principal as well when they come in?
I don't know.
I don't either. That's why I'm asking the question.
I will say from my perspective, I think we are different than other badge holders. I've said before in public meetings and at the workshops that I don't think that the board members should have badges because we are not district personnel. We have a very different role here than the other folks that carry badges. But if we have them, I really don't have a problem presenting myself at the visitor's office so that folks know I'm in the building.
When you go and badge in, doesn't that alert someone that you're in the building?
I don't.
And
think
who
so.
it is?
keeps a record of the folks in the building. That's what I would expect. But I highly doubt that my picture pops up on Gavin Johnson's desk and says, hey, Alicia's in the building.
Well, but it would say someone's coming in this door or whatever, right? I'm assuming in Officer Bell's office or something? I don't know.
I'm not sure that we do that.
No, I don't think it's live. I think it keeps a record of who comes and goes when but it's not going to like send an alert to anybody when a person badges in. And just so you know, the four of us, because we're not regular workers in individual buildings, we always check in at the office. It's just a best practice that we all use. But if I were to go to Horning, for example, the first stop is always to the office. And I say, hey, I'm here. I'm going to take a walk around, or I'm going to go down and talk with such and such. And that's just a best practice that we all do because we're not regularly in the building. So that's just for context.
And that's fine, but I guess, do you have to go and make sure Gavin Johnson's there and knows you're in the building?
I
Or
don't
you
think,
just check into
I
the
don't
office?
believe that it requires, that's not in the policy. That's not proposed. It's just checking in.
And just, can I make a point? It's not just getting in, it's when you leave. As a visitor, you have your sticker. When you leave, you drop that sticker off so they can check you out. I volunteered in a lot of the buildings. They want to know when you're out of the building as well. So if you came in a back door, we do have the badge, I guess, that would allow us in, but no one would ever know when we left. So if you're in and out the main office, they have a record both ways. So from a safety standpoint, I think that was another way that we were trying to get at this.
Well, like I mentioned in the last meeting, I doubt if there's a safety issue, they're worried about one board member that's in there when there's, 2,000 kids, to be honest with you. I don't think that's the first thing on their mind,
It's not
right?
any one of us individually, it's as a whole practice.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the proposal at least. So I think that there certainly both policies are related because they deal with folks on premises, but they are separate policies. One is aimed at all of the folks that come visit our buildings, and the other is aimed at board standards of conduct, expectations we set for ourselves.
So anybody from the central office that has a badge needs to check into that building as well? Is that correct?
That is not on the policy, I don't think. It just says visitors.
Well, they would be a visitor one day, or are they considered an employee?
They're employees.
We're employees. It's just a best practice that we use as employees. That's what we do.
Is an LESA person an employee of ours or LESA's?
They're assigned to our buildings.
Are they an employee of ours or of LESA's?
They would be an employee of LESA.
Okay.
But our custodians would be an employee technically of EduStaff. So that LESA employee assigned to Horning, for example.
So
is a
the
regular
janitors would
employee.
check in then with the office when they came in?
No.
As a
No,
non-employee?
because they're employees. They're employees that work in our buildings.
And I will say, just from a drafting standpoint, employees are not covered by policy 3105. That's visitors and volunteers, not employees. There are separate
Okay.
sections of the policy code that cover employees.
But again, if they're not employed by us, they're not an employee, correct?
We have policy sections covering employees and contractors.
Right.
I'm not.
So they're
prepared to
considered a
get into
contractor then, I would
details
guess.
of that, but we can certainly bring that back if you need that.
I'd like to see what it said. I'm assuming they need to check in as well.
Off the top of my head, I don't know.
I don't
what the
either.
answer to that question is. So, Mr. Scaling, if you could help me
No,
make sure that we can know.
since they're assigned to those buildings to work, they wouldn't check it as regular visitors would, no.
Is that according to our policy?
I don't believe the policy specifically speaks to our substitutes and our custodians and those types of third-party contractors as they're assigned to those buildings, no. As
Okay.
far as signing in as visitors.
Okay. But you think a board member should sign in as a visitor? Just saying. I'm done.
Mr. Collin?
So, so Alicia, I'm glad you mentioned that. So Ms. Reed doesn't believe any board member should have an ID badge to the school. That's number one. The other is that we're not a visitor. We're elected officials. So if you're going to change the policy, it should say elected officials, not visitors. And I think the point is that everybody here on the board, as far as I know that I've spoken to, has no problem if they're going to be integral to the schools of doing background checks. And it's their option, just like we have the, what's it called? You know, the Raptor system when you come in, you swipe your license. And for me personally, I always go through the office. And today when I was at the school, I checked in at the office, and when I left, I checked out. It's been pretty standard practice, so that's not anything new. And I think it's good routine for us to do that when it's at all possible. But after school and different times, there's an opportunity. We have to go through the back door and go through like the STEM center, the STEAM center. And that kind of access is good. And I think what you're doing, I understand. And again, this issue of asking for the background checks on individuals working with students and all that is good. This other part is a removal of rights of an elected official. And I don't support that at all. So I think we need to take this back to policy committee and maybe we could do something with that. And if you're going to try to remove that, say it how it is. Say you're going to remove the rights of an elected official to have a badge. That's really what you're doing, because you're putting us under the control and permission of an administrator. That's really not how this works, in my opinion. And
With all due respect, Mr. Conley, that's not what the words on the page say.
when you combine the two together, it's what they mean though.
But they don't, even when you combine them together. I respectfully disagree, because policy 3105 sets standards for background checks on badges, period. Policy 2302 regarding board conduct says that we will follow 3105 as a visitor or volunteer, which means what? That if we have a badge, we've complied with those things, but you don't have to have a badge. It doesn't take your badge away. It doesn't require you to have one. And it says that visitors may be required to sign in and present a form of identification to explain your purpose when you're there. I don't see that as taking away any of our responsibilities or rights as elected officials. And quite frankly, the fact that even more explicit language requiring superintendent review and approval of board activity on site is prevalent in the Howell policies, in the Heartland policies, in the policies in Ann Arbor and in Saline. They all are there, and that's not even what we're presenting you here. So I don't see this as an infringement upon anyone's obligations or opportunities to exercise their duties as a school board member, but I certainly respect your ability to not vote for this policy when it comes up for a vote.
Mr. Collin?
So I would take the entirely opposite approach that other districts that have a policy that restricts the elected members' access to their buildings, which in fact in Heartland schools requires a superintendent supervision of the board member when they go on site. And even if their own children are in the school, they're not allowed in the school without an appointment. So I think we have a really difference of opinion on this, a big one. And the things that we all do, and I know that you have children in the school. I personally went to Brighton High School. I personally had my son graduate from Brighton High School. I can share with you that every time we went to the school, if I didn't have my badge per se as a board member, I'd put my license up and then, oh, you've already got that, you're on record and you can go into school. I don't think anyone up here disagrees with that. But this control and who has the control is definitely a big issue. And I think it does take responsibility away from an elected official and give more care and custody to a person on site that would be management of that building. And I'm not so sure that's the direction I want to go in my position. And I made a decision basically not to call the vote on something personally, and the board did too, but it's the way I probably could have called it when you weren't here, because I'd like to have this just modified a little bit so we can all agree on it. So versus it had been a 3-3 vote the last time, potentially, I can't say how people were going to vote, but if it was 3-3, now we have a board of 7, and I think we should work through this and do it with diplomacy and what's correct from the board member's perspective. I'd say not to move this forward for a vote, is my opinion on this, and I think it can either be scrapped entirely, or we adopt a policy that, again, people that are going to be in the school agree to the iChat background check. And I think everybody's had it. I think, Star, didn't I contact you about the iChat and send it out to all the board members, or we could, if they want to sign up for that?
I think it was sent out January.
Yeah, so there you go. And if you're going to be in the school on a routine basis, fill it out. If not, you need to check in like a regular citizen. I think that, and what it constitutes a regular basis, today I volunteered to help some students in the senior class, and I was there for an hour and a half. And I think it was a benefit for the students. And I'm not so sure management of my company was happy I was gone. It'd be my wife. But the idea was it was a good situation. You wouldn't want anything to restrict that opportunity, is what I'm saying. And what about the student that came and loaded the trailer at our shop? Who's taking care of that? So we have a large reach here that has a big umbrella to cover.
All right, so I guess, yeah, I guess the options are, we move it forward for action. We can keep it at this point and for future action if there is any interest on the part of when is the policy committee meeting next?
Monday.
Okay. So if Mr. Conley wants to propose some language to the policy committee that might clarify the concern that he raises, and then we bring it back again in June for future action, that's another alternative. Or the other alternative is, it seems like the policy, what the work that comes out of the policy seems to generate the most debate at the board table. And the other alternative is that we sort of fold the policy committee, and if we talked about at the last meeting having more of workshops for our second meetings of the month, and put any policy changes on sort of our workshop committee of the whole, where we can all talk about it and work through that language, as opposed to who said what or didn't say what in the policy committee, and then having I'm just trying to be efficient. So
I mean, again, I'm thankful that Ms. Reed was here tonight, and I mentioned in the last meeting that I appreciated, your candor and honesty, and I said it again tonight. So I'm glad that you were here.
And I don't think we'll ever get anything done at a workshop if we're debating policy the majority of the time. And I appreciate what the policy committee does. Believe me, that's not something that I want to sit in and read and discuss. But when it does come to things like this and an issue, and I think quite a bit of the policy that's been passed, there hasn't been a lot of debate on. I think it's gone fairly smooth. This just happens to be one that got some issues. So it's got some issues. But again, I typically 95% of the time when I go to the high school, I go through the front door. I don't go through the back door. So again, I think it's a bit restrictive. Maybe it needs to be rewritten. Maybe we should reevaluate it. But again, I think the policy committee does a good job in what they do, and they get this stuff done, because I don't know other ways how it'd get done otherwise. So
I would appreciate any recommendations for how we can change this, because I mean, all we're asking you to do is check in at the front door. I'm not sure what else you want to happen. So if you have suggestions, please forward them on to the policy committee so that we can do that work. I'm hearing your reservations, but I don't know what you want the text to look like.
Well,
So please send that along.
Let me give you an example. And again, this is only because of what's taken place back at the STEM Center and the things in the back of the school. It's very difficult for me to go from the front to the back to go look at something to see what's wrong or something of that nature, when I could very easily just drive around the back, get out of the car, swipe my badge, walk in the door and look, and I'm done and I'm out. I mean, it is somewhat physically demanding for me to go from the front office all the way down there and all the way back. That's my concern. So.
For me, it's wording, and Bill's in his position is correct. We travel, and it's a big walk from the front door to the back there, and that's Bill's situation too, and I support his opinion and where he's at on that. For me, it's just going to be wording about board members, about elected officials versus visitors. They're going to be some.
Do you want a different definition?
I believe so.
I mean, is that what you're
I think so.
looking
I have
So
to.
you would like a different standard for the board than we have for the rest of the visitors?
I'd like a elected official's position. Your elected official took an oath of office that states you'll uphold the Constitution and the laws of this country and our state. You're different. You are different. You're elected. And I know you don't want, I'm not going to put what you want. I can't say I'm doing better. So I am. Can you tell? I'm trying to. So I don't support it.
So from a process standpoint,
Yeah, I'm
if
good
you
with
can provide
Yes.
some,
What I'd like to see.
and then that, if
You
the
guys can
policy
see how
committee
it
is
fits.
willing to revisit that at the meeting, and then we'll leave it on for future action at the meeting on June 12th with whatever potential revisions may or may not be made.
My understanding is that most of the concern is about the board code of ethics, not the visitor policy that is 3105. So are we willing to move 3105 for action at the next meeting while we leave 2302 for future action still?
I think we should just look at it together.
I say, what's the rush? It's
Look at it together.
school's out.
Okay.
School's out this summer.
All right. That concludes the for future action portion of our agenda. It moves us into board reports. We had any committee meetings since our last board meeting?
We continue to meet
A bond, yeah.
weekly from bond, but again, just a couple of quick things. I don't know if you noticed in the back of the STEM Center where the water was leaking, they've got that repaired over the weekend. That was a collar that wasn't defective or something that was causing the leak. That's taken care of. They'll pour the concrete back. You can look at Scranton, that's continuing to move forward. They're going to start curbing the new road soon, and then after the curbing, the underground is 90% complete there. After the curbs, they'll come in and start putting in the base coat and then the finish coat. So that should be done, I would guess by the first portion of this summer. And from there, the rest of the follow-up with the parking lot, they'll continue to move to the east with the renovation of the parking lot from there. And then one more thing, boys track this week, or this Saturday, right? They won the.
Yeah, that on last Friday, boys track won the regional championship.
Yep.
So big deal. That was great.
Good job.
All right. Anything further? Mr. Collin?
Yes, Mr. Englander. Mike.
That's my fault.
It's okay. I had asked last week if we could talk about robotics for the refinance the budget. Were we able to come up with any details on that the last few years?
Yeah. After I do.
We can do it in the finance committee.
Yeah, why don't you, I mean,
Okay,
I think that's the proper protocol be for that to be discussed at the finance
We can
committee.
just put it on
Yeah,
for June 1st. So, yeah, thank you.
okay. All right.
Can I
Ms. Marks?
Two quick things. First, I don't know if anyone else was able to attend the K through 12 art show last weekend, but it was phenomenal. The STEAM Center is perfect to hang everything. It was a great display. I was there Friday night. It was very well attended, lots of smiling faces, and the students are phenomenal. It was really impressive. So hopefully this will be an annual thing. I understand it had been done historically before and then a pause, but it was really great. So if you didn't go this year, I'd recommend it next year. And then I just wanted to mention also Scranton for the second year now has National Junior Honor Society, and they inducted over 100 eighth graders last week. And so that is just like for the high school, combination of academic requirement and then 12 service hours. And they had a really nice slideshow playing kind of behind with rolling slides where the students put in what they had done to earn their service hours. And it was all over the map what the kids had done to contribute to the community. So congratulations to Scranton, and hopefully that continues. It was really, really a great night.
We also had final concerts for band, orchestra, and chorus. And I have to say, at the high school level, the concerts that I attended, we have some phenomenally talented students in our district, and we should be very proud of the work that they put into the performing arts and then to sharing their love of music with us. It was absolutely wonderful.
Mr. Storm?
Just a couple questions.
Sure.
At the last board meeting, I brought up payment terms, and I was just wondering, Mike, this is multiple months now, we're kind of rolling here. Have you had an opportunity to work with Dr. Outlaw to develop a template for district standards around payment terms?
No.
So when should we expect that? That was something you committed to doing, so I'm just wondering when we should expect that to be resolved.
After I finish the budget out, we'll see what we can do on working on the payment terms.
So it's like a long time-consuming endeavor?
Mr. Storm, with all due respect, one of the things we talked about when we were setting up the board reports portion of the agenda was to really try to limit it to the reports from any committees and then the recognition of any events or district successes.
Yeah, so what I'll do, Roger, if this is a big ask of the administration, is I will work to put this into district policy, but I think it's a disservice to the district and to the public and to the community that we would have to take this subject to the policy committee meeting to get someone who makes over $100,000 a year to develop what is in any environment, any nonprofit, any organization that handles money of this magnitude. We have a $100 million budget. It's ridiculous that we have to ask the head of finance to propose to the board standard payment term guidance.
Well, there isn't standard payment term guidance, and
Exactly. That's a problem.
I think it's a disrespect to cast aspersions on something about which, if the board wants to have a discussion about the circumstances under which payment terms can be permitted and what the scope of that would look like, because it does differ if you're talking about bond projects, if you're talking about general fund purchases. I mean, because there are legal requirements for the different types of purchase the district make. I'm not going to get into a debate about this. I think it's disrespectful to make that broad,
To suggest that the head of finance for
That's not what I said.
$100 million budget to
That's not what I
provide
said.
guidance
If you
on
want to
what our
provide,
district payment
if you want to
terms are?
provide your concern, put it in writing and we'll address it. But my point was that this is not the appropriate time on the agenda to address this issue with which
I'm bringing it up
people may or
because
may not agree with you.
It's been brought up at multiple meetings in a very professional manner. And the response from Mike is consistent with his response this evening. I mean, it's just ignored.
Is there anything else you want to identify with respect to positives that have taken place in the district or any committee reports?
I guess from a policy standpoint, we had the session this evening with the MASB.
Yeah.
And one of the takeaways from that session was actions being taken during closed session. And so in the spirit of district policy, I guess my question for you and for Dr. Outlaw, have there been any actions taken year to date in closed session for this district?
Have there been actions taken in closed sessions?
In closed session?
No,
No actions?
no. Not that I'm aware of. I have not been at every closed session meeting, but all the closed sessions that I've been
Been
to.
at every closed session meeting, Dr. Outlaw?
Yes.
Are you aware of any actions that have been taken in closed session year to date?
So there's a difference between consensus.
Simple question.
Well, there's a difference between a board action.
The board
and-
consensus, absolutely. Board action, no, there was not board action taken.
Okay, thank you.
All right. That concludes everything in our agenda for this evening. And our next regular meeting and budget hearing will be June 12, 2023 at 7 p.m. I thank everyone for being here this evening. Have a great evening and happy Memorial Day. Probably won't see you until then. And this meeting is adjourned. Oh, I saw that. You had like a 3 hitters. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's got a total of 14 right now.
Yeah, he's really lighting it up. Well, he's really, fortunately, it shows that, he's really taken, great steps in his recovery from the surgery.
Well, yeah. And look at, tell me about the investment Purdue made, right? And now it's paying dividends.
Right. They took I give them credit. They took a risk.
They did.
They did, and it's paying off.
They took the right risk.
Yeah.
He's hot right now.
Yeah, he is. And it's happening at the right time.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly.
So you've got red lines you're gonna send
Yeah, did you see it? Thank you so much. Can you see it? Well, we appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. I know you're to Oh.
Jen, can you hit the lights on your way out?
Yes, sir.
And then hit the doors.
I will do that.
All right. You got a couple. This kid's finished coaching. Coached 10 years. So you lose that connection and help them grow. But it's still a recognition. Students understand much, even though they're most solid. It's interesting, so the lesson is to get all those young people. Yeah. And some special needs kids come through. Right. Student. Well, you don't know that. Right. And again, the key and stuff. And you see it from your grades. What they supply.
They are 1,300, yeah. Other high schools probably up to around 1,100.
So they're not 2,000?
No, the building was designed for, so they split the one big one into two delivered, yeah, that's what they did.
So that's where you put volumes.
Right.
They got
Two big, well, no, Mark Thompson, like that.
Yeah, anything like that.
So,
all right. So
the other question, the other FOIA you have is the robotics.
Yeah, I think we're gonna need it. I think that Mike's gonna handle that. I think we can scratch that.
So I just wanted to make sure, with respect to FOIA, if we had already had a document that was produced. Yeah. Well, yeah.